Hello dear viewers, support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it, and also make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. The goldenwood prow, shaped like a swan, cut through the water, drifting past elegant white buildings, until the barge reached the rocky knoll of gray marble. The Isle of the Gods resided at the center of the city where the Long Canal and the Canal of Heroes intersected before worn-down statues of long-dead sea lords. At the other temples and shrines, a steady stream of worshippers entered and exited under the watchful eyes of priests, acolytes, and guards. But here, there was no joy or celebration, only a somber and forbidding silence. The temple was not grand like the fortress of the Lord of Light, or opulent as the Temple of the Moonsingers, or even bizarre like the refuge, that giant brick repository of dead gods that even Braavos had forgotten. But then again, few men and women willingly visited the House of Black and White. In the chilly morning, the clouds swirled violet and orange. Along the canals and the bridges, lamps burned the final drops of oil of the last night as rays of pink and blue peeked out over the horizon. On the boat, light glittered through the colored glass panes of brass lanthorns, revealing velvet drapes, woven tapestries, and silk cushions. The handsome servants guiding poles against the dock wore shirts of striped satin and breeches of fine linen, bright colors that obscured slender blades and throwing knives. Even dressed in drab browns and grays, the beauty of the barge's owner could not be hidden. She wore no gold or silver in her hair, or jewels about her fair neck. The plain cloak covered her voluptuous body, but unadorned, she was still exquisite. Young enough to pass for a newly flowered girl, with a face so lovely that kings would beggar themselves for her maidenhead, and merchant princes would pay enormous sums to escort her to a feast or ball. Her eyes sparkled lilac and purple as the fading moon and stars shone brighter upon her form. "My lady," the boy begged, with a thumb on the hilt of his dirk, "we are your guards. Let us come to defend you." She shook her head as they lowered the plank. "There is no use. You could not hope to fight them in their temple. But how do we know if you will return, my lady?" The boy cried, his concern shared by the others on the pleasure barge. She walked down to the dock, in the shadow of the squat windowless building. "Valar Morghulis, I was summoned here. If the Faceless Men wanted me dead, they would not kill me in their home." Belligeir Otherys, alone and cloaked, made her way up the stone steps to the great weirwood and ebony entrance of the House of Black and White. The last thing she saw was a smile in a cowl of black and white. She thought the colors reversed from the doors, but then remembered belatedly that the smiling priest faced her as the waif placed the blindfold over her eyes. She was marched, not ungently, through halls that sloped down flights of steps, through vaults and tunnels. Occasionally she stumbled to touch the carved rock walls, her fingers brushing against the hidden markings underneath. That gave her some small comfort, even as the thin girl pulled impatiently at her sleeve. Belligeir had made this trip a few times before, but not since her mother died 10 years past. Baelenara Otherys brought her here as a child, and led her down these strange halls. Every Black Pearl, even the first, made this bargain, pledging their daughter to serve the House of Black and White. Her reaction had been first shock, then fear, and finally doubt. As a courtesan of Braavos, she was well aware of what men and women desired: firm tits, a tight ass, and lips to lust for. The Faceless Men demanded more. They wanted blood, the blood of the dragon. There had always been Valyrians who dreamed of things to come. Dragon dreams haunted both Targaryens and Blackfyres for centuries, Belligeir snorted. She had a speck of dragon blood from many generations ago, when Aegon the Unworthy had come to Braavos on a trade mission. And even then, she doubted that the first Black Pearl, the captain of the Widowwind, River, and Pirate Queen, was faithful to a whoremonger prince. In all her life, Belligeir had never dreamed of dragons, not even once. But no one in Braavos would refuse a summons from the Faceless Men. They took away the blindfold at the end of the journey. The rough-hewn room matched her memories, dark with high ceilings, lit only with a few torches. She stood facing a semicircle of ebony and weirwood chairs. The men were mostly hidden in shadows, with cowls of their black and white robes pulled down. There was a fat man with a hook nose, a handsome man with a beard of blue, a squinter, a lordling with a golden dagger, and a starving man with thin, sallow cheeks. Belligeir recognized no one but the old man in the center. The old man had been old a decade ago. His right eye was milky white with blindness, and his left eye glittered in the dark. A long white beard dominated the impassive face. A thick, gray mustache could not hide the frowning lips, and two large hands, white as bone, pointed toward a glass resting on a polished silver tray. The flute held a deep blue liquid shade of the evening, the wine of warlocks. She stepped forward and drank it down. The liquid oozed like honey over her tongue, but there was no sweetness. Shade of the evening tasted vile, a melange of rotten meat and spoiled milk and tainted flesh. Belliger would have spat it out, but the old man stared at her with cold, hard eyes. Beware of kindly men, her mother had told her, for those were the ones most likely to do harm. She waited. Nothing changed. The Faceless Men stayed quiet. She waited again, her head held high and her gaze steady as silence reigned. No one spoke. No one moved. Belliger wondered what they wanted to hear. Like all Kirchens, she had been trained to lie, but the Faceless Men were all liars, and very skilled ones. Fun girls lied for coins or to avoid a beating. The Faceless Men lied to take lives, and the old man of the mountain was perhaps the best of them all. That one truly believed that he was the chosen of the many-faced god. What do you see, child? The old man whispered. The face smiled, but the eyes remained cold. Belliger opened her mouth, hoping to stall for time, but then she saw the dragons. The chamber disappeared, and the rough-hewn roof turned into a dark sky. A red comet with a long tail burned, outshining the moon and the stars. All around her, misshapen dwarves capered on mounds of skulls, bent on rapine and slaughter. Some played with broken and barbed blades. Others merely had blood on their grasping hands. The sounds of battle drowned out the incessant cackles of the dwarves. Armies waged war. Phalanxes of unsullied spearmen, mounted Andal knights in heavy armor, Dothraki screamers charging with arags, companies of archers and crossbowmen, and olive-skinned men riding swift, slim horses with narrow, beautiful heads. But above them all were the dragons. I see dragons, but she saw far more. Children cried out in hunger, women wept in fear, small folk and merchants begged in vain for safety, and slaves knelt, clutching broken shackles. She saw priestesses riding black and white horses, harpies and sphinxes hissing, lions and wolves fighting, a massive fleet from humble poleboats to a great war galley with a golden kraken. How many? Perhaps Belliger should have spoken about the men marching off to die. Among the ships, she spied the purple sails of Braavos. But the old man only asked about the dragons, and Belliger was not in the habit of giving things away for free. 3. The fat fellow opened a wide mouth full of stained yellow teeth. Daenerys Targaryen has 3 dragons. The largest one burned the good masters of Astapor 2 moons ago. The handsome man frowned. Daenerys Targaryen is far away. What business does Meereen have with Braavos? The old man held up a pale hand for silence. Where are the dragons? What do you see? Belliger closed her eyes to concentrate. 1 dragon flies over a ruined pyramid, 1 over a harbor of a walled city, and the 3rd. She couldn't tell. There was water in all directions, covered by thick fog. The great black dragon soared over the slender spires and elegant domes that peeked through the low cloud cover. The black dragon flew higher. Water, water, everywhere. But as the dragon rose, the far shores came into view. The river was vast and swift, and flowed in every direction past living and dead cities, revealing the veins of a leaf that was Essos. Suddenly she realized where this must be, the greatest river in the world, and the most cursed, doomed, by the greed of ancient Valyria, Mother Roan. The dragon has come to the Rhone. She opened her eyes. The Faceless Men were famous for self-control, but even they were shocked. The headwaters of the Rhone were close to the Sweetwater River that fed Braavos. In the eyes of the old man, Belliger saw fear, anger, and a glint of madness. And then she fainted and fell. The freckled boy rapped gently on the cabin door, announcing the approach to White Harbor. The Lord of Runestone sighed as his men-at-arms donned mail shirts and strapped on swords and daggers. The knock had been too respectful. Jon Royce wished to travel in secret, avoiding unwanted attention. That hope was clearly in vain. Yoseles Andar, he nodded with approval as his son and daughter were ready to disembark. The brazen monkey made good time from Gulltown, thanks to favorable winds blowing north and west along the narrow sea and the Bight. The Lord of Runestone hired the Carrack a fortnight ago, thinking that the small ship would slip under the notice of Littlefinger's spies, but the crew clearly knew that he was no merchant. In truth, he shouldn't have bothered. Jon was a formidable man, with power and influence, and even in his late 40s, a capable warrior, with sword or lance. He lacked any skill at subterfuge. In many ways, the Lord of Runestone was what singers imagined of Valemen, proud, prickly, and honorable. But the Vale had changed since the death of Jon Arryn. Arryn had withdrawn to the Eyrie and stopped her lords from fighting in the Riverlands. She had been greatly wroth when some younger knights, led by his son Robert, joined the Starks at Harrenhal. Her anger turned into fury when news of their brave deeds at the God's Eye and the twins reached the Vale. Lady Lysa refused to support the North even after her sister had been murdered on Tywin Lannister's orders. Madness, he blamed Littlefinger. Like other lords of the Vale, Jon paid no attention when Jon Arryn made Baelish a custom collector at Gulltown. Somehow, in only 10 years, the grubby coin counter would be the new Lord Protector, with Robert Arryn as his ward. A whoremonger, a moneylender, and now a Lord Paramount and the Warden of the East. How in the Seven could a tax collector rise so high? Jon shook his head. Baelish had the audacity to send ravens to the Valemen, declaring that no contact be made with the renegade North. The letter had been signed by Lady Lysa, but everyone knew the true author of those words. Jon had not been allowed to fight with the Starks. But he would be damned if Littlefinger stopped him from attending his son's wedding. Jon stood on the deck as the brazen monkey approached the docks. The city was a clean and orderly place, with white stone and gray slate houses built on a hill. Is White Harbor always like this? His Erandar asked. Do you mean the defenses? A huge stone, hundreds of feet across, dominated the approach to the inner harbor. The ring fort bristled with armed men and catapults. Hundreds of slits gave cover for crossbowmen, archers, and dozens of new scorpions. Anyone who attacked White Harbor would pay a very high price. No, I meant all the ships, Endor said. Yang blinked. This was his 4th time up north. He came here as a boy with his father to meet Lord Rickard. He returned north with Ned after the Greyjoy Rebellion, and he escorted his youngest son Waymar to the Wall. In those trips, he had never seen the port so busy. There were cogs and caravels bearing a Manderly sigil, but also dromons and galleys from Old Town and far away. Essos. A few longshops plied the harbor, and there were slender skiffs and flat barges, best suited for fishing or travel up the coasts or rivers. The port was full of strange smells and sounds, laughing chatter from flamboyant Tyroshi with bizarrely dyed beards, the stink of hairy whalers home to the shivering sea, olive-skinned merchants from Myr and Volantis, and even further east. White Harbor bustled with trade. Robot, Yaxilla cried, waving her hands at a large group of men striding in their direction from the seal gate. All thoughts of city defenses and ships vanished from Lord Royce's mind, as Olizia rushed to embrace her brother. Somewhere in the war in the Riverlands, Sir Robert Royce had become a man. He had already been a knight for 3 years, when he departed Runestone for Storm's End. But Robert was still young and foolish, prattling on about jousts, tournaments, and glory. That boy was gone now. Young noticed that Robert no longer donned the bright red armor and multicolored cloak that Rodier and Bavarithian gave to the so-called Rainbow Guard. Instead, his son wore plain steel armor, heavy furs, and a cloak with a gray wolf pin. Robert looked every bit a Northman. Father, allow me to introduce Sir Wyllis, heir to Lord Wyman. And these are knights sworn to defend House Manderly. Sir Rian Waterman, Sir Thorin Wolfield, and Sir Harker Flint. Bronze Jan held out a gnarled hand to Sir Wyllis, who gave a short bow of deference. Lord Royce, House Manderly welcomes you to White Harbor. We have rooms for your party near the barracks in Wolf's Den. I would be happy to feast your men, but my father wishes to leave for Winterfell tonight. Would you be ready to board a ship on the White Knights this evening? Of course, Sirin. The sooner my son is married and I have grandchildren, the better. The men laughed at Yod's words. The Manderly Knight's plump face broke out in a wide smile. Very well, my lord. I will have servants bring you meat and drink. Wyllis said. Harbormen came forth and began to unload the boat. A few children darted back and forth, scribbling down numbers and figures on wax tablets. They followed the orders of an older lad who also wore a brooch. Unlike the knights, the boy's wolf pin was white and not gray. Bronzion waited until Robert, Ondar, and Yatsala exchanged heartfelt greetings, and the men-at-arms secured the room and patrolled the halls. He did not fear an attack, but preferred not to be overheard, not by his knights and certainly not by unknown spies. Winches delivered hefty platters of crispy ducks, bacon pies, fresh bread and roast potatoes, steaming hot from the kitchens. Hot buttered rum, wine, and beer were served with the meal. Jon drained a tankard of nut brown ale and finished half a duck before he began to speak. "Did you have to marry a Frey?" he barked. Robert, taken by surprise, finished chewing the pork pie. "Her name is Arwen, and she is a Frey no longer. Her last name is of the Crossing, or it will be until we are wed in 2 weeks' time." Endar chuckled, ignoring their father's grimace. "A pot is still a pot, even if you call it by another name. Were there no northern women available? There are far more Northmen than northern ladies, unless I want to go to Bear Island or find one in the mountain clans." Robar wrinkled his nose, thinking of the hairy mountain women. "What of the Stark girls? I hear that they are quite pretty." Yaxley said. "Lady Arya and Sansa." Rosier knopped up the rich bacon gravy with a hunk of bread. "Walder Frey tried to buy Arya Stark for his youngest son by betraying the North to the Lannisters. Jon Snow took pleasure in burning Elmar alive, and as for Sansa Stark, is it true what they say about King's Landing? The Red Keep remains a disaster. The Tower of the Hand is useless, White Sword Tower gone, and the Iron Throne a lump of melted steel. No one can sit there now, least of all Tywin or his brat of a grandson. I wish I attended that wedding." Jon replied. Rosier shrugged. "Then you can see why no one is eager to court the Stark girls. Besides, Arryn is a pretty girl of 10 and 5. She is kind and bright, and friends with both Lady Rosalind and Sansa Stark. We will live together with her younger sister, Shie." "And where will that be, Robert?" "And how?" Jon asked. "At a holdfast along the eastern banks of the Weeping Water. Lady Sansa intends to settle many of the Valemen there, close to the sea. Sir Michael will be further west at the Dreadfort, but I will live only a day's ride from Sir Andrew and Sir Ben. The Starks plan to build a town and harbor, where the last river and the Weeping Water run into the Shivering Sea. And will you have enough land? Lady Erwin has a sizable dowry. The Starks had been quite generous to the Frey ladies, and I will receive a large tract of land for fighting to defend Lord Robb at Seven Streams. But will it be fertile? What do you know of running a farm? When winter comes, will you and yours have enough to eat?" Bronzion probed. His son finished his beer and smiled in clear amusement. "You do not need to worry about that, father. Before we arrive at Winterfell, you will see why." The North Star made its way quickly up the White Knife. The River Runner was one of the 4 Manderly ships. The Royces had been given the spacious cabin next to Wyman Manderly, and Bronzion marveled at the size of the Lamprey Lord. The Warden of the White Knife ate 5 large meals a day, and that did not count snacks. The provender on the boat was magnificent: pork pies stuffed with carrots and onions, eels, roast goose, giant hams basted in honey for breakfast. Wyman had porridge with boiled eggs and pork sausages. Wyman Manderly had too many chins, but an amiable smile and a booming laugh. The Lord was happy to share the stores of food and drink, showering Yaxley, Andra, and Robar with hospitality. But behind that large and gluttonous facade there was a clever man, hungry for news about the Iron Throne and the other kingdoms. Bronzion was happy to share what he knew. Restone was close to Gulltown, and Royce men heard much gossip from the docks. The steward of Roanstone, a cousin of Lord Grafton, knew the port city well enough to avoid Baelish's sycophants and liars. Yaziord confirmed the deaths of Varys and Pycelle at the Wildfire wedding. Lord Tywin had taken back his duties as Hand, but there were rumblings of trouble. Lady Marjorie was betrothed to Joffrey, but the marriage had yet to take place. Yorn heard whispers that the Reachmen were less than pleased with House Tyrell. Few people, including the Valemen, were happy with the state of affairs in King's Landing. Baelish married Lysa Arryn and took charge of the rearing and training of young Robert. The other Vale lords wished for the last Arryn to be fostered at Runstone, but Baelish refused. Yorn feared the 10-year-old boy was still feeding on his mother's teats. In return, Lord Van had been happy to talk. The Starks were intent on increasing trade for all their lords. Roads and bridges were being constructed at an astonishing pace. Workers had been sent out to inspect new harbors, and shipwrights were hard at work building cogs, barges, and riverboats for trade and transport. Wintertown was full of new blood from the Riverlands, the Vale, and other places in the north. White Harbor had begun to attract merchants from foreign cities amid rumors that the north had more to trade than wool, hides, and timber. As Wabin happily chattered on, Jon noticed the dark-haired boy from the harbor on the boat. The Manderlys had brought a large retinue to Winterfell, knights, merchants, and entertainers, along with casks of seafood. But on each of the 4 river galleys, there were children, boys, and girls, with quick, curious eyes. The dark-haired boy was quickest of them all, and the only one with the white wolf pin and a cage of ravens. Chet was a northerner, born and bred near Wintertown, but one of those who had taken charge of the catapults, ballista, and trebuchets during the campaign. At the Twins, Snow's boys built rafts out of wood, nails, rope, and barrels to take the 2 castles. Jon still did not understand how Snow constructed bridges from so little, but it was clear that Robar and the Manderly men held Chet in great esteem. "Look!" Robar shouted and pointed ahead to his sister and brother. The North Star had made good time up the swift currents and rocky chutes of the White Knife. The riverboat was approaching the fork, where the knife divided into 2. The eastern side ended at Long Lake, the boundary between Bolton, Umber, and Stark lands. The western stream went to the southeast border of the Wolfwood. Jon gazed at the split in the river. He saw nothing special, just farms. His eyes glanced over rows and rows of neatly tilled crops, barley, corn, and wheat. Some fields were newly sowed, others dense and brown, ready to be harvested. The plants grew tall, the corn was higher than a man's head, and the barley reached past a man's waist. Interspersed with the green and gold squares were fenced-off paddocks of oxen and cattle, and large orchards and vegetable gardens. "What are we looking for?" Ender asked. The North Star turned left, hugging close to the right riverbank. The crops stretched as far as the eye could see, east, west, and north past the White Knife. How was the land so fertile? Even the fields of Highgarden could not match this bounty. Barns and stables dotted the land, and herds of cattle and horses grazed on clover amid swarms of birds and bees. "What is this?" "Golden fields," Wyman Manderly replied. "Jon Snow built this after returning north. The water from the White Knife irrigates the fields." "But how?" Bronzian had never seen such a thing in the Vale. Canals, pipes, ditches, dams, dikes, screw pumps, water wheels. The wheels are hidden in the barns to protect them from the cold. Chet spoke proudly. "We can direct the supply of water in any volume in any direction we like, anywhere in Golden Fields. Today, the irrigation system stretches 20 miles to the east and 20 miles to the west at the split of the White Knife. This farm is 20 square miles? That's quite large," Yaxley said. 400 square miles and growing," Chet said. "Snow has 400 square miles of farmland," Yaxley asked in shock. Chet shook his head. "Golden Fields does not belong to Jon Snow. He gave the lands to the small folk and the Wintertown boys. The Maester taught us how to irrigate and sow. He showed us where to dig ditches and canals. But these lands are ours as his gift. We are planting corn, wheat, barley, rice, potatoes, beans, and 24 more fruits and vegetables. And the Maester has told us to raise cattle, horses, sheep, and other animals here." Robar nodded. Ned Stark granted a charter for a new town on the White Knife, Golden Fields, the granary of the north. Snow divided the land among any villagers who wished to work the fields. Chet and the others measure and report every detail, which crops grow better, how fast they can be harvested, how much feed each animal eats, how quickly they grow, what they learn here. The Wintertown boys plan to teach every bannerman in the north. "But won't the animals die when winter comes?" Jon asked. "Even in the warmer south, most livestock was butchered at harvest time." "No, the Maester has solved that question. Wheat, turnips, barley, and clover. The main fields rotate between the 4, but it is the turnips that make the difference. Turnips are tough enough to survive cold, easy to store, and the cows, sheep, and horses love eating them. In fact, each acre produces so much turnip fodder that we have to prevent the animals from eating too many. Our herds have grown dramatically in the past 6 moons," Chet answered. "Golden Fields is the bounty, the Septons promised in sermons but never delivered. Even Garth Greenhand could not create such a wonder in the north Arwen has a dowry of 2,000 acres, and I will be given 4,000 more to start a new house sworn to Winterfell. So I will plant a great deal of turnips. I will not go hungry, father. Robier smiled. No, Sarah Roba, you certainly won't, Chet added. Your father means to kill me, and my children. The double-chinned blonde woman in a crimson-red dress ranted. Now, my lady, I am certain my good brother means to honor us. After all, it is a mighty castle, and well, the short, stringy, nervous man squeaked. Oh, shut up, Aemon. Get out and let people with common sense speak, she snapped. Tyrion nodded, and his guards escorted the runt out to the courtyard. In her youth, Jane Frey, Ned Lannister, looked like Cersei, but she had an extra 5 pounds in the face and 15 pounds in the ample chest, and more weight was packed below her bosom. But Tyrion gave no thought to that. His aunt was the closest thing to a mother he had ever known. Sir Adam cleared River Run without trouble. The Blackfish might hold the twins, but he hardly has the manpower to raid the Riverlands, let alone siege a castle, Jaime said. You do not need to reside at the castle. Send a castle in, you will still receive income from the lands and taxes from Fair Market and the Stony Sept, Tyrion said. And what idiot would rule in my name? How many years will it be before the North returns? One day I will awake and the wolves will be at the gate, or inside the castle. Cleos and Tyon still have nightmares about the twins. Do you think I want my family veins alive for lands my grandchildren can never hope to hold? Father will not be happy. Lancel has already renounced Derry, and now you reject River Run. We have fought a war for very little benefit, Jaime said. Jenna shrugged. When was Tywin ever happy? At least Lancel will live longer, more than the Freys can say. Before the war, cousin Lancel had been a poor copy of Jaime, not quite as handsome, a few inches shorter, not as strong, and far less skilled with the sword or lance. The fighting turned him into an old man, crotchety and ill-tempered. In defiance of his family, Lancel pledged to give any holdings of lands and gold to the Seven. He had shaved his hair in a monk's tonsure, which looked absurd with sandy blonde hair. Lancel had sworn a dozen oaths. Poverty, chastity, hunger, charity, penance, obedience, and who knows what else, and had become a gaunt, humorless figure haunting various septs, preferring the company of sparrows and begging brothers. Aunt Jenna was wrong. Lancel had died in the war and left a pious ghost. Tyrion, are you even listening? Sorry, my mind was elsewhere. He apologized to his glaring aunt. What is your father planning? How does he intend to face the Starks? Father does not confide in me. You of all people know that. Tyrion retorted. You are on the small council, Jane said in reply. So is Jaime as Lord Commander, and Uncle Kevin as Master of Laws and joins the meetings with my father as Hand and Cersei as Queen Regent. If it wasn't for Mace Tyrell as Master of Ships, it would be a Lannister family meeting. His aunt was not amused. Mark my words, your father is not free of the Starks. His bannermen grumble about the costs of the war. The king's hold on the Iron Throne is weak. You cannot rule 7 kingdoms with the support of only one. Your father must do something against the North, and when he does, he will put all of our lives at risk. Because if Tywin loses again, then it will not just be the Iron Throne, but Casterly Rock. We may all lose our heads. She stormed off, ignoring the guards. Tyrion smirked. Aunt Jaina, like all the Lannisters, had a sense of the dramatic. Still, she wasn't wrong. Tyrion wondered what scheme his father was hatching. A direct attack on the Starks was impossible. Even if White Harbor could be taken, an army would have to march through hundreds of miles of hostile territory in the cold without any supplies. And sending men up the King's Road to Winterfell meant thousands dead of hunger or disease before a single battle, unless they got ambushed by Robb Stark first. Jacomai's cleared his throat. Tyrion, we have to speak. Tyrion poured out the last of the wine. We are doing that now. No one else can hear. This is very important. Jaime looked about furtively. Tyrion sighed. It was a good thing Jaime was a knight, and not a spy. Podrick. He handed the squire a bag of silver. Be a good lad and go buy some arbor wine at the Broken Anvil. Ask for a fruity red that pairs well with soft cheese. Take Brond and the guards. Treat them to a drink. Tyrion waited until Podrick left. We won't be disturbed for hours. The purse will be empty before they return. Now what is so important, dear brother? Jaime blurted out words that Tyrion never expected to hear. I saw Tisha at River Run. He clenched the goblet hard to stay calm. Ah, my long-lost wife. Was she working at a brothel or merely a camp follower? I saw her at the castle when I was a prisoner of the Starks. In the castle? What is she doing there? Is she Edmure Tully's illegal woman? She is no illegal woman. She never was. I am sorry. Jaime's distress showed in the tense face. But you purchased her for me? You told me she was a maiden woman and that you had arranged the whole scene with the bandits. The perplexed Tyrion said. I never bought her for you. Father commanded me to lie when he heard of the marriage from the Septon. She was a crofter's daughter that we rescued on the road. Rescued, Tyrion yelled. We rescued her from outlaws so she could be raped 100 times over by Father's guards. She was my wife. I know, and I am sorry. Tyrion hurled the goblet. His brother, with cat-like quickness, dodged, and the wine splattered on the wall like a streak of angry blood. Get out! Get out! I don't want to see you again. Tasha was my wife. She loved me, and I watched as she was raped. Yaxley shook his head, refusing to leave. There is more, Tyrion. You need to know. More? What more can you say? My own father had my wife raped again and again because she was a peasant girl and guilty of loving me. What more can you do to hurt me? Jaime bowed his head. There was a boy at River Run, her son, and yours. If he had another goblet or a bottle or even a cask, Tyrion would have thrown it at his brother's head. At least, he would if he did not drop it out of pure shock. How do you know? She was taken by an entire barrack of guards. I saw him at River Run. He has golden hair and green eyes, Lannister eyes. Tyrion desperately needed a drink. He regretted hurling the wine. Is he a dwarf? Malformed. Ugly? A wretched creature? No, he is tall and clever. Handsome. They say he taught the other servants how to read. He is named Jerry, after our uncle, I think. And he fought for Jon Snow at the Trident. He manned the catapults at the wall, James said. The words stirred a faint memory. Teaching small folk. At River Run, I saw a handsome blonde boy in the Wintertown crew. He did not look like a northerner. Why tell me this now? Why wait so many months? Tyrion answered his own question. You were looking for him. I asked Adam to search for Jerry and his mother at River Run. He found no trace. I think they went north with the others. The Starks have taken many refugees from the Riverlands, not just the Highborn. Jaime said, Does Adam know who the boy is? I am not a fool, Tyrion. Adam is my friend. Whether he suspects or not, he asked no more questions about the boy. Adam Marbrand was the best choice for such a task, Tyrion admitted. As a page at Casterly Rock, he sparred with Jaime many times. He was a shrewd man who could hold his tongue and yet thoughtful enough to carry out a thorough search, and he was loyal to his brother, not Tywin. I am still a little angry, Jaime. Actually, I am very angry. But are you certain he is my child? Tasha hugged him when he returned to River Run. He looks like Uncles Tyrak and Gurion when they were young. He is a boy of 13 name days, yet clever enough to teach others to read. A son. He had a son. He could hardly believe such a thing. And Tasha, his first love, was alive. He had not seen them for 13 years. What must she think about him? Did she rue the day they met? Was there any hope left? He remembered how she sang "The Seasons of My Love" those 2 happy weeks in the little cottage by the sea. Wait, does our father have any idea? Jaime shook his head sharply. Of course not. You know what he would do? Father would have my son and my wife murdered. He would find another lorch to do the deed. The son of the imp, the grandson of the great Tywin, half small folk and fighting for the Starks, the Lion of the North. Tyrion stared down at the floor. Does Jon Snow know? I do not know. But if he does, Snow has kept it silent. There are no whispers. Tasha was only a woods witch and healer. Jerry was treated well and trusted. He delivered a message to the Castellan of River Run after the Battle of the Red Fork. I need to find them, Jaime. I need to speak with Tisha and meet my son. He wondered what she had told the boy about his father. Jaime shrugged sadly. You can't, Tyrion. All the ways into the north are guarded. You would be captured at White Harbor or Moat Cailin. And worse, Father would find out. The Starks would as well. Your own actions could bring danger to them. Tyrion barked a sound half between a laugh and a sob. The gods have a strange sense of humor. The Lannister boys, we have sons that we cannot claim, and yet our father pretends that family is everything. Family is everything. Why else would you care about your son? Tell that to our father Tywin, and Tyrion refused to speak any more with his brother. Belligear woke up on the floor, cold and dazed. They had covered her with a thin white sheet, a shroud. Did the Faceless Men think the shade of the evening had killed her? That could be the case. Assassins were far too familiar with death to make such errors. She closed her eyes and kept her breathing low and shallow. You cannot trust prophecy. Who knows if this Black Pearl can truly see the future? Daenerys Targaryen is a young girl who made a mess out of Estepor and Yunkai. Will she even escape Meereen alive? A skeptical voice declared, "The Dragon Queen is a threat because she has dragons, instead of this madness. Why not just kill them? Dragons have died before. Poison, city riots, a scorpion bolt through the eye. 3 deaths are a good gift for the many-faced god, better than hundreds of thousands." The voice belonged to the handsome man. And if we fail and kill only 1 dragon, what happens then? What if Daenerys Targaryen learns that the Faceless Men want her children dead? Dragons are not known for their mercy. Will she come west to the road and burn Braavos to ashes? And what would you have us do? Nothing? Shall we sit and wait for the conquest of Essos? A sly voice hit back. I would have us not to seal our doom. Why should we be an enemy to Daenerys Targaryen? Let her rule over dusty pyramids, rivers, and a melted throne. Braavos has lived in peace with the Targaryens before. We are servants of the many-faced god. We give his gift to those who have been marked and chosen. We do not kill kings or queens. We serve. We do not rule. She heard a faint rap against stone, and then silence. Had Belligear opened her eyes, she would have seen the old man stand up, his hands stretched out to encompass the other Faceless Men. We serve him of many faces by giving the gift of mercy. Have you all forgotten why our order began? The first Faceless Men came from the slaves of ancient Valyria, who toiled in the mines. They burned in the deep shafts. They breathed sulfur and ash. They crawled deeper under the 14 flames. The slaves suffered and suffered. Yea, for generation upon generation. Only one force was capable of such endless agony. Not the lockstep legions of Gis, the Nomads Raiders, or the Iron Blades of the Andals, only the Dragons of Valyria. Braavos was founded by slaves of the Freehold. We swore that we would never be slaves again. We must stop the dragons. Daenerys Targaryen cannot go west. The old man of the mountain said. But your weapon is not aimed at the Dragon Queen. It will slay thousands, perhaps millions. The fat man declared somberly. Girl! The old man cried. It was useless to pretend. Belligear opened her eyes to the hard faces of hard men. Girl, you saw dragons. What else did you see? I saw armies and ships. I saw knights and footmen marching to battle. She answered truthfully. The old man smiled. All men must die. War is coming. And death as well. Royce marveled at the new road, so wide that 2 large carts could pass without troubling small folk walking on the slightly sloped sides. The last leg to Winterfell from the western fork of the White Knife was slow going, partly because of workers adding layers of gravel and stones to the roadbed and footpaths, but mostly because of Wyman Manderly. 4 draft horses, 2 in the front and 2 behind, transported the open litter. The Lord of White Harbor sat like a giant slug on his throne and happily called out to fellow travelers, keenly interested in what goods were being brought to and from Winterfell. Some carts carried casks of cured meats, wheels of cheese, and sacks of grain. Others were less easy to identify, pungent crates and half-sealed barrels of white powder and metals. Rozier was not the only one getting married at Winterfell. At the inns and alehouses on the road, they met Stouts and Dustins and Flints of 3 different branches escorting bridegrooms. There were a great many Frey ladies that needed to be wed. Finally, they arrived at Wintertown, and once sleepy village that now stretched miles with cobbled roads and a spacious hall before the gates. Guards and knights walked about, but there were far more small folk, merchants and traders. The sprawling market had dozens of stout wooden stalls with goods from all over. It reminded Jon of Old Town or ports in Essos as opposed to the quiet north of the past. Lord Royce, A tall brown-haired man wearing mail under a thick wool cloak hailed them. Vale knights who had joined the Starks in the war followed the warrior who had a touch of fuzz on his boyish face. Savsor Mitchell Redfort, Jon greeted him warmly. The Redforts and Royces had long been allies. Unfortunately, the stubborn old codger, despite his wife's wishes, refused to travel north and see his youngest boy married to a stone. Or is it Lord Michael Redfort? He interjected as he embraced his childhood friend. Michael blushed brightly. It will be Lord Meachel soon, but it may not be Redfort. I plan to take a new name with Maya. Yaxlia offered her hand to be kissed. And where is your lady love? Have you been wed yet? Michael gallantly pressed his lips on her hand. Lord Rob intends to celebrate the weddings together, and then we would go off to our new lands. As for Maya, come with me. They found her, with a crowd of small folk near a small river, amidst an enormous flock of sheep. Maya stood up, nearly as tall and broad as Michael, and gave the Royces a broad smile. She was a pretty strapping lass with deep blue eyes and coal-black hair. Her stained leather trousers and heavy gray coat were more suited to a laborer than a lady to be. Maya, Yaxlia sniffed the air. You stink. The girl laughed, her voice full of mirth as she put one arm around Michael and the other a dubious Yaxley. It is lambing season, this is the second batch, and there are many twins, and I wanted to help out. When you deal with mules, sheep are not much trouble. But why so many? Jon asked curiously. Thousands of sheep littered the fields and the ground appeared white. Many had new babes which were being marked and measured by Wintertown boys who also doled out corn and hay to feed the tired ewes. We are raising them for wool. Feel this. Yaxla caressed the coat with glee. It is so soft and fine. But will Michael force you to weave and knit? Will you ruin your hands and eyes picking thistles out of sheep? Hardly, you cannot believe what they have done here. Snow has crafted a spinning wheel that can turn wool into thread with ease. You can use your feet to push the wheel. The wheel flies faster than anything and the thread twists easily around the bobbin. Anyone can use the wheel to spin yarn. The Wintertown boys have attached wooden hammers and metal needles to the mill that cleans cards, fluffs, and pounds the wool. They even can wash and color cloth with ash and dyes. Snow thinks that lace patterns can be made by braiding threads around the bobbins. Think about it, Yaxley, cloth that is easy to make. Color and weave. We can create our own dresses with wool, lace, and fur, Maya cried with great enthusiasm. Lord Royce shook his head. Cloth, all this fuss about wool and lace. Jon's words were ignored by an exuberant Maya and a curious Uzia. Jon Snow has grander ambitions than a few dresses. Sir Michael said. He took them to a large shed near the river, there, resting behind a few sturdy walls, and tended by several Wintertown boys. A large vertical wheel turned in a long wooden frame, and thread spun through 3 dozen spindles. The strange device moved by itself, powered by the water flowing in the river. The spools of yard were taken from the frame, and fed into a loom where a boy with a lever produced a bolt of cloth, much wider than a man was tall. Are you creating clothes for giants? Yoni asked, looking at the massive sheet. No, sorry. The blond boy on the side said, That is canvas for a sail, a very large sail. Large and strong enough to sail to distant shores. The pleasure barge floated aimlessly about Braavosi, meandering around the long canal like a wealthy noblewoman on a stroll. The boat passed beneath the green copper domes of the Palace of Truth and the tall, square towers of the powerful Tyrion family, before making its way to the less grand parts of the city. A few servants descended at Ragman's harbor in Silty Town to purchase fish, clams, and crab for provisions. A couple more waved at the mummers practicing their craft outside the Blue Lantern near the waterfront of the Purple Harbor. But Beligier stayed inside, the velvet drapes of the cabin drawn. She was not hiding from the Faceless Men. That was a fool's dream. If they wanted to kill her, Beligier would already be dead. She was mildly surprised that she was still alive. Braavos was a city of secrets, of masks and whispers, and the greatest of these was not in the Seal Lord's palace or the Iron Bank. Those who knew too much about the House of Black and White did not live to tell their tales. And now she knew quite a lot. Beligier did not spend time wondering why she was spared. Her mind focused on the visions brought forth by the shade of the evening. Braavos had heard rumors of Daenerys Targaryen and dragons. Most dismissed these stories as fables spread by sailors eager to boast of their adventures, but she had seen 3 dragons, and the third one had flown over the Rhine. Beligeira was not a hero. She was a courtesan trading on the family name and her sumptuous body for gold. She knew history, though. The last time a dragon had flown over the Rhone had been 1,000 years ago. That had ended very, very badly, even for the Valyrian dragon riders. If it is only one life, or even a few dozen, she would not have done much. But hundreds of thousands lived in Braavos. She would not see her city burn. She ordered her crew to cast off and head down the long canal. Her servants pulled quickly and silently past the statues of the Sea Lords. Where the canals met, a great temple stood, snow-white marble topped by a mighty dome with milk-glass windows depicting all 8 phases of the moon. 2 statues of maidens supported a crescent arch in front of the high gates. Beligeira passed through the door. The temple was not crowded. Here, the priestesses offered milk and wine, and danced the night away in ritualistic fervor. The Temple of the Moon Singers was the largest and most well-attended in all of Braavos. Hundreds of years ago, a shipment of slaves on their way to the sweltering jungles of Sotharios had revolted and seized the convoy of ships. The Moon Singers of the Jogos Nai had prayed, and their goddess had delivered a vision of a lagoon behind a wall of hills and stones, where fog and freezing rain would hide them from the dragon lords. Over the next decades, as more slaves fled the Valyrian freehold, that refuge became the secret city of Braavos. If anyone could understand and sympathize her plight, it would be the Moonsingers. The acolytes took her to the highest place of the temple, directly under the dome. The windows of the observatory looked out at the sky, and the room was dominated by an orrery that modeled the motion of the sun, planetas, and stars. The moon was represented by a silver ball. Beligeira faced 3 priestesses, a fresh-faced girl, the second, a dark-skinned woman, and the last, a crone, hunched over in old age. The Moonsingers no longer belonged only to the Jogos Nai, but the 3 still followed the customs of that warlike tribe. They wore a short robe of felt wool and furs, with the right flap close to the body and the left covering. The coat was padded and pocketed with silk lining and belted with a wide sash. The women of the Jogos Nai shaved their heads and eyebrows. It was rumored in Braavos that they were hairless all over. After sipping a cup of the hot, sweet tea, Beligeira told her story. She began at the entrance of the House of Black and White and spoke uninterrupted. She left nothing out, not the debate between the Faceless Men, the gleam of madness in the old man, or the suffering of women and children as armies squared off to battle. The Dark Lady sighed. "We know the old man Rashid el-Din. He comes from Samarkand in the Great Sand Sea. He escaped as a boy when his family was slain in a rebellion against the rulers of the 3 cities. Do you know what he intends to do?" "How does he expect to kill so many?" the young girl asked. If not for the color of her skin, she could pass for the daughter of the other Moonsinger. Beligeira shook her head. "I was not awake when they spoke, but not all of the Faceless Men agreed. Some believed that too many would die. Too many deaths for the Faceless Men. That does not bode well," the Dark Woman said. "We could speak to others in the city. The Iron Bank does not like things that disrupt trade, and the Faceless Men have heeded the Weeping Woman and the Dreaming Gods before. But not for 100 years. The Faceless Men will not listen to reason. They follow the God of Death. He is no friend of ours. We must stop them before." The girl said. "It is too late." The crone rose on her ironwood staff and hobbled over to the window. The sun was setting on the drowned town, where poor Braavosi lived only on the highest floors of the mostly sunken buildings. "It is already done. The old man has completed his plan." "What has he done, grandmother? What have the Faceless Men unleashed?" the girl said. "Death." There was no fear or anger in her voice. At the western edge of Braavos, a Tyrosi sailor with a blue beard and a thick accent recounted a ribald tale of his exploits in a Lycian pillow house with 2 high-born sisters. He ended not with a booming laugh, but an abrupt hacking cough, spitting out a watery ball of black phlegm and mucus as he struggled for breath. The rest of the crew, eager to head out to the taverns and alehouses, paid no attention, but the first mate was surprised. Like many veteran mariners, the Tyrosi had the iron constitution needed for years at sea. No one saw Rashid el-Din walk away from Ragman's harbor and toss the empty vial at the feet of some passing illegal women. Ruzienne Frey was not as appalling as he had feared. The girl had a forthright, blunt manner, but none of the late Lord Walder's querulous nature, and she was pretty, with long reddish-brown hair, wide hips, and an amiable smile. She got along well with her sisters, was treated by the Northmen with respect. Rosier could have done worse, Lord Royce admitted. Jon had always seen Frey women as sad, pasty creatures, barely human, dressed in drab colors, locked away in a dingy castle, to breed until they died. To the shame of House Royce, his great-aunt Para had fallen victim to that fate, with 4 children and 2 stillborns in the short time she was the first wife to Lord Walder. The men were not much better. With a slovenly, weaselly look, he remembered one in particular in a tournament melee at King's Landing. A rat-like knight who wore a leather skull-cap with a crow's peak and long sides dangling down over his ears. Jon wasn't certain if the Frey had been a miser or had no gold for proper equipment. 6 moons had passed since the fall of the twins, and the survivors were greatly changed. The ladies dressed in lighter colors, whites, blues, oranges, and yellows. Time spent outdoors in fields, pastures, and farms made them stronger and healthier. To be awarded a fief, the Starks required assurance that the land would be well managed. That meant lessons in reading, writing, and arithmetic. Instruction that was eagerly sought out and taught to nobles and small folk alike. Jon was not sure how he felt about that, but in the north, everyone worked, even if that work was simply learning how to better manage a farm or household. The Royces sat down in the great hall of Winterfell for a hearty breakfast. Porridge with hot milk, soft-boiled eggs, rashers of bacon and pork sausages. Arwen spread butter, honey, and blackberry preserves on freshly baked bread. She handed the first slice to Lord Royce and then served Robar and his siblings, before giving a large hunk to Sherry topped with a cracked egg, the yellow yolk oozing out. Who is that beauty? Ander gawked at a lean woman with tousled dark hair and dark eyes. She wore an unlaced, sleeveless leather jerkin over a quilted brown tunic. A smirk crossed her face as she stretched out, revealing thick iron manacles connecting her right wrist to a shapely left leg. An unsmiling blonde giantess in armor stood guard, her hand clenching a padded morning star. Usse Greyjoy, when Snow drove the raiders out of Deepwood Moat, her ship, the Black Wind, was captured with all her men. Her brother Theon escaped, Arwen said. Balon's daughter, her father declared himself king of Salt and Rock. Lord Reaper of Pike, Jon said. It seemed like the Greyjoys were always revolting. Is she a princess, then? Will House Stark marry her off so the North can claim the Iron Islands in her name? Lucia examined Asha with great interest. Robb Stark wants nothing to do with shitty islands full of shittier thieves. Robar snorted. Then why is she here? Wouldn't the king ransom his daughter? Andar asked. Snow dispatched the Ironborn prisoners to various ports in the Northeast Watch, Bear Island, Sea Dragon Point, White Harbor, Widow's Watch. So long as her men help with the building of new ships, she will be treated well as a hostage, Arwen said. But if they make trouble, Lord Snow will chop off her hands and feet. For every man who tries to escape, they will snip off a finger or a toe. The little free sister said, Sheriff's eye, Arwen said with a bemused tone. Where did you hear that? Sherry pouted. Adara told me she heard it from her brother Benfrey, who heard it from his uncle Leobald. Well, you shouldn't believe nonsense, particularly from the Tall Hearts. A few Ironborn have tried to run and were hunted down. No harm came to Ashera. As far as I know, the Ironborn like her enough that they are willing to help with the construction. House Stark is building a large fleet with many new ship designs. Some have triangle sails and multiple masts. Arwen said. Ships? Is that why the Starks are so busy? Jon was mildly disappointed. Yesterday, Sansa and Robb greeted him with great respect, and the Lord of Winterfell personally offered bread and salt. His family had taken rooms in the Great Keep, an honor and sign of trust, and yet he had barely seen any of Ned's children. The crippled Bran and young Rickon stayed in the Godswood with their dire wolves. Lady Sansa was busy with endless planning for weddings, and Robb was deluged with requests by the nobles on a mountain of matters, great and small, but it was the last 2 that were ghosts. Neither Arya Stark nor Jon Snow had made an appearance at dinner last night. Jon gathered that their absence was not unusual. The Starks are very active with many things, father. They do not mean to slight you. Lord Robb is assigning fiefs for new lords and knights, and Snow is even busier. Rose said. And what is Snow working on? Jon asked. We would all like to know that. Asha Greyjoy walked closer. and sat down. She favored the Royces with a brassy smile, ignoring the chains rattling against the wooden table and her scowling guard. She was less a beauty and more a warrior, fierce and proud as the sea. Sheersley hid behind her sister's skirts. Arwen glared back, while the men were momentarily stunned by the Greyjoy's blunt manner. "And why should we tell you? You are a prisoner. I won't be one forever. It only takes 2 months to build a ship, even these fancy new ones. Give us enough wood, iron and sails, and my men can build a fleet quickly. And copper too." "Copper? How are they using copper on a ship?" Jon asked. "Snow sheathed the bottom of the hull and the keel with copper plates. I have never seen such a thing. It protects the ship from worms and barnacles. He believes that ships with copper plates will not need as much pitch to protect the wood. If that is true, then the Northern Fleet can travel further and stay out longer at sea. But if that is true, won't Snow build hundreds of ships? I am afraid, my lady, that you will be a captive at Winterfell for a long time," Aendir said. Asha rejected any gallantry. "I am no lady. I am a captain. Snow will only build so many ships before he runs out of captains. Might be. He needs a kraken to sail the 14 seas." "And why would he trust you?" Erwin said. "Because I am the best captain he has, better than these fat mermen, and far, far better than Glovers or Flints or whatever idiots live on top of mountains. If he can trust Freys to bear the North suckling babes, then he can trust me to crew a ship," Asha said. "Snow has been locked in the library tower for many weeks. The servants say that he takes meals and sleeps there. Only the Starks and the Wintertown boys are allowed in his workrooms. Who knows what he has created?" Robar said. "Perhaps catapults or fire weapons. Surely the Starks are preparing for war," Jan said. That was the question on many in the Vale. When would the next war begin? What would the North do? How would the young wolf get revenge for House Stark? "He is not building catapults or siege equipment. You would need more space to test such weapons. I see small folk delivering barrels, crates, and metal. He is working on something else." The girl turned back to her table, leaving the curious Faceless to ponder her words. Robb woke up at the rapping on his door. He had barely closed his eyes before falling into a dark slumber. He dreamed often of the ambush and the deaths of Talisa and his unborn child. He had failed them, and Grey Wind, it was only because of the dire wolf's sacrifice that he had managed to survive the treachery of the Lannisters and the Freys. "Lord Stark, it is Bran," a boy called through the door. Robb hastened to put on a gray wool tunic. He limped past Hallis Malin and the other Winterfell guards, the reminder of crossbow wounds suffered at the Twins. Bran's room was only a few doors away. Robb dispatched a servant to find Jon. Bran had thrown off his furs. Maester Luwin pressed a wet towel on his brother's pale face. 2 small figures stood outside the door, and Robb recognized them as Howland Reed's children. They had become good friends with Bran. Robb motioned the guards to let them in. "Another vision, brother," Robb said softly. Sweat dripped off Bran's forehead. Cold blue eyes on a field of ice, dragons flying over the sea, and a cowled rider on a horse. The boy cried, still in the throes of hallucinations. "The last was new. A rider? What did he look like?" Robb said. "A black cowl, a dark robe, a bony arm with a scythe. He had no face, and rode a pale mare." His brother woke up. "Just bad dreams, Bran. Try to forget them." Luwin poured a cup of water. "It was real, Robb, as real as you or Winterfell." Bran pushed away the maester's hand. "I saw the rider. He is coming for everyone. Your brother has the green sight. He has a greater gift than mine. He dreams of things that may come to be," Jusian Reed said in a strange, distant voice. "But they also may not come true." Jon made his way into the crowded bedroom. He took the cup from Luwin and pressed it into Bran's hand. "Prophecy is a tricky thing. I have to go north. The three-eyed crow is calling. He will teach me how to fly. I have to go beyond the wall," Bran cried out. Maester Luwin shook his head, but Josian nodded in agreement. Robb was annoyed. His father valued Lord Reed greatly as a loyal friend, but Robb thought the Crannogman's children could be more forthcoming with their secrets. "No, Bran. 7 hells, you are not going. You can't walk. The only way you go north is with me, or Jon, and an army behind us. It is freezing at the wall. I will not have you traipsing around in the cold and snow." The three-eyed crow can teach Bran many things. The last green seer can look through the eyes of the weirwoods and see the truth that lies underneath the world, Josyn said. A crow has wings. Why can't the three-eyed crow teach Bran here? Jon replied. He says that he can teach me how to fly, Bran said. You believe me, right, Jon? You believe my visions mean something. Jon nodded. I do, but a creature that can speak in your dreams can teach you there as well. I don't want you or any companions to die beyond the wall. One day, perhaps, we may go north and meet the three-eyed crow. But not today. Robb bit back a sharp retort. He wanted to yell that Bran would never go north, but words spoken in anger would not help. He took the furs from the ground, knocked off the dust, and covered Bran. The boy closed his eyes and went back to sleep. I will stay and guard him, Lord Stark. Meera Reed piped up. He had seen the short, slim girl spar in the yard. She fought well with a woven net and a three-pronged frog spear. Thank you, Lady Meera. We all need rest. That includes you, Maester Luwin, and everyone else here. Robb waved away the guards, fighting his exhaustion. He had not seen much of Jon the past few weeks. What do you think of Bran's dreams? He believes them, and who is to say that he does not see the truth? The sailors say Daenerys Targaryen has birthed dragons in Essos. Then she will cross the narrow sea to claim the throne. So that explains the dragons. But cold men with blue eyes. I thought the others existed only in old name stories. This dark rider on a pale horse seems more a nightmare than a vision. Robb replied, nightmares and visions can come true. Do you remember when you found the direwolf pups? Robb nodded. He was happy that day. He remembered Grey Wind's eyes, still closed as the wolf pup nuzzled against him, seeking warmth and milk. We found them coming back from the execution. The body of a dire wolf mother as large as a horse. We thought it was only 5 pups until Ghost came out of hiding. Rougier told me that the dead dire wolf had a broken antler lodged in her throat, killed by a stag so that the pups needed to fend for themselves. You think it was a sign that the Baratheons would do House Stark harm and father would die in King's Landing? Yes, a warning of the future. Just like the shattered antler was a bad omen for the Baratheons. 2 brothers dead, the last one a kinslayer, and the male line extinguished, except for Gendry. Neither Jon nor Robb believed that the royal children came from Robert's seed. As for the Baratheon bastard, he was in the Riverlands, smithing at the inn at the crossroads. I wish father heeded the warnings. I wish we all had, Rhodes said bleakly. But if Bran's visions are true, we may be in grave danger. But how can we fight what we do not know? We do what we are doing now. Grant land and domains to new lords and knights. Feed the small folk, construct roads and harbors, find trade partners, build what we can. Whatever happens, the North will be stronger and ready. We cannot predict what will happen. We can only prepare for the winter. Get some rest. Robb, worrying does not much good. Arya woke up before the sun rose, the better to avoid the interlopers at Winterfell. Sansa badgered her to get to know the other nobles, including a flock of soon-to-be-married Freys. Her sister told her to take meals in the hall, attend lessons with Luwin, even play the harp with the other girls. Arya's fingers were about as well suited for music as they were for knitting. She was the first of her brothers and sisters in the Great Keep to awaken. Rickon slept a great deal. And Sansa and Robb were often busy into the night, speaking with visitors. As for Bran, her broken brother could not rise from his bed, so he had to wait until others arose. She stopped and overheard the servants preparing breakfast. Master Bran woke up again in the middle of the night. The poor boy has nightmares. Rougier stole a small loaf of hot bread. She slipped out of a door and made her way across the courtyard to the library tower. As she approached, she felt many eyes. The library tower was packed full of little birds, children rescued from King's Landing. At Winterfell, Jon had arranged that they be provided a safe home with as much food as they could eat. The bell tower near the rookery was converted into a giant kitchen. Servants delivered warm meals to the library at all hours of the day and long into the night. The little birds were wary at first, but urchins used to begging for crumbs could hardly resist steady nourishment. Lamb and venison stews, beef and bacon pies, roasted onions, smoked fish, baked apples and honey cakes, ample food, warm clothes, a hot fire, thick blankets, and beds stuffed with straw and down. It was not that much, but the children were thankful. Her brother Jon asked for nothing, but the little birds returned a fervid devotion. They patrolled the library, attended lessons, built canals and water wheels, herded the flocks, spun wool into cloth, worked at golden fields, and ran countless errands, almost equal to the Wintertown boys. And they kept her brother's secrets. Jon had secrets. The most important one was that he was a Targaryen. Arya had wanted to confront her brother about this many times since the twins. When had he known? Who were his true parents? Arya guessed that he must be her aunt, Lyanna's child. That would mean he was the son of Rhaegar Targaryen, the last dragon. That would make Jon the rightful king. That secret, if uncovered, would shock the world. Crotillard could not find the words to ask. True, as commander of the North, while Robb recovered from injuries, Jon was busy and often surrounded by others. She knew that it would be both wrong and dangerous to allow others to overhear her questions. Time passed, Robb got better, and still, Crotillard could not face the truth. What if Jon denied everything? Or worse, what if he just nodded and agreed? I was never your brother, Arzia. I am only a cousin. She made her way up the stairs. The lower floors were cold as she passed storerooms and cellars. As she rose, so did the temperature and the noise. Wooden slats and staves were everywhere, and even at sunrise, apprentices were making and cleaning barrels of all shapes and sizes. Most were aged white oak, bound together with steel hoops and rivets. Open barrels were placed for a short time on flames to char and toast wet wood. The barrels were rolled away from the fires to cool down and be sanded and measured. Arya wiped away a bead of sweat. It would only get hotter. She opened the door to her brother's workroom. A blast of heat from the many metal coils passed over her face. Giant copper pots, sitting over peat flames, were connected by a network of pipes. Wintertown boys monitored the pots and pipes, watching carefully as barley mash and water were converted into a liquid that dripped into jars. Arya knew that much of it would be thrown away with the best parts reheated and recooled again and again. She found Jon at the corner near an open window. A strong breeze blew over the furnace, and Jon dipped a hollow clay tube into molten liquid. With great care, he took the tube out and placed the white-hot end into a metal mold. He rotated the tube with gloved fingers, blowing steadily. Chet opened the mold, revealing a translucent square with an elegant rounded neck. "What are you doing?" "Trying and failing to make glass." Jon frowned as he examined his work. Then he placed it with several others of the same shape, all white but streaked with pale green, blue, and orange. The rosiers stood away from the heat. Pretty. The light sparkled through the bottle, and the colors seemed to dance with hints of a rainbow. Too pretty. I want clear glass. In me, the artisans can make lenses for far eyes to observe the stars. This glass has too much color, Jon said grumpily, putting down his gloves and tools. But Maester, the glass will make excellent bottles. We can add colors and draw shapes. We can even enamel and decorate the glass with different powders, Chet added eagerly. So can the craftsmen of Mir. Adding color is easy, making glass clear is hard. We're missing some metal or material that can take the color out. Blast the Magisters for keeping their secrets. Chet, keep trying. Use the rocks from the Wall Mountains or the ash from Ironrath. Jon left the workroom behind. Royce accepted a cup of lemon water in the observatory. Master Lowen's bronze far eye looked out the small window over the walls of the south gate. You were up early, Arya, her brother fiddled with the far eye. I heard that Bran woke up last night. His dreams are troubling. Cold eyes on a blue field, dragons, a rider on a pale horse. This three-eyed crow keeps calling to Bran. What does it all mean? The cold blue eyes are the others, and the dragons are clear. The rider on a pale horse carried a scythe in a bony hand. Death, then? Arya said. Probably, but how? There are many ways to die. Bran wants to go north to meet the three-eyed crow. He believes the crow can teach him how to fly. That's crazy, Arya exclaimed. Bran had changed from a young boy dreaming of knights to something far more bizarre. Perhaps Robb forbade him from going, but it is not that simple. Jojen Reed believes that Bran has green sight. The Crandegmen have their own ways. In the Age of Legends, they grew close to the children of the forest, and the children could use magic. They carved faces on the weir woods, and they had visions of the future. So, Do you think Bran's dreams are true? I believe his dreams may come true. Her brother hesitated slightly. I have dreams too, Arya. Many I do not understand. Like Bran's dreams? Jon shook his head. No, not quite. Often I dream of the past, or places far away. Sometimes I see battles yet to come. On the boat in the God's Eye, I saw Grey Wind wounded in the crypt. Once before a battle, I dreamt I would win victory and die. But you didn't die, stupid. Not yet, but there are wars yet to come. Arya glared. You are not going to die, Jon. I won't let that happen. You won't leave me behind. I will stay by your side and make sure you stay alive. Some dreams come true. Other visions may be false and lead us astray. But all men die, Arya. One day, Bran may have to meet the three-eyed crow. And one day, there will be battles that cannot be won. We cannot avoid our destiny. Promise me, Jon. Promise me that you will fight. Arya was more angry than sad. I will, little sister. I will not go gently into the good night. He mussed up her hair, just like when they were children playing in the courtyard. Besides, you are my squire. I need to make sure you become a knight before I die. Robb Stark was tired. His father had made ruling seem so easy, dealing justice and commanding the respect of the northern houses. From morning to noon, he had no respect. There was always a lord or heir clamoring for attention, requesting special rights or judgments in their favor. House Glover asked for gold to compensate for the Ironborn incursion on Deepwood Modig. House Manderly sought more ships and a charter for a new town of Dunstonbury on the White Knife. And the Umbers and Karstarks grumbled that their lands benefited the least from expanded trade, even as they wanted harbors and bridges built. So far, the knights and lords from the Valemen and the Riverlands had made no demands, but Jon said that was only a matter of time. The newcomers were too busy pestering Sansa. He dismissed the guards at the ironwood door. Sarazian looked concerned, but the hound merely shrugged and called for a servant to bring meat and drink. The entrance to the crypt was long and narrow, with pillars 2 by 2 along the length. The stone statue for Grey Wolf that would guard Talisa's remains had been commissioned, but not finished. Robb realized that Lady's bones buried in the lich yard should be dug up and placed in the crypt. He descended further down into the cavernous vault. The air became cooler and the halls wider as he passed the statues of dead lords. His father's bones were still missing, although the stonecutters had finished chiseling the likeness so that Ned Stark could join his brother and sister. As he turned the corner, he saw a light and a white direwolf taller than his chest. A black cat with a torn ear lurked in the shadows. Robb placed his torch down. Jon, what are you doing here? His brother had placed a garland of blue roses on the statue of Lyanna Stark. She resided between her brothers, Brandon and Ned. The empty tomb beyond was reserved for Robb, but next to the resting place for the ashes of Talisa and his unborn child. Mourning the dead. Winter roses were her favorite. Jon kneeled next to Ghost, red eyes looking at the long face and gray eyes of a girl who died too young. Can I have a few for her? Of course. Jon searched his face for a moment and then handed over 2 pale blue roses, the largest of the bunch. Then you know why I am here. Robb knelt down on the cold, hard earth, placing the flowers gently on his dead wife's tomb. Talisa was 3 moons pregnant when she died. It has been 6 more moons since the twins. Our child would have been born, perhaps today. If it had been a boy, I would have named him Eddard, and he would be heir to Winterfell. Now the babe is just ashes, just like my wife and Grey Wind. I failed them. Had I been smarter, or quicker. Robb, no, Jon, it is true. The lords whisper that I am a wolf king, hoping I will take the throne and declare the North independent. How can I be a wolf king when my dire wolf is dead because of my stupidity? And the war in the Riverlands, I made a botch of everything but the battles. I thought the battles would be hard, but it was everything else. The Ironborn, the Freys, Jaime Lannister, Tywin's plots. Look at the cost. My wife. My dire wolf. My son or daughter, dead in their mother's body. I am not fit to be king. You never wanted to be king, Robb, and yes, you bear some blame. We all do. If Jaime Lannister was a captive, Tywin Lannister would have not conspired with the Freys. Everyone makes mistakes in war, Jon said. Father didn't. He, Jon Arryn, and Robert Baratheon called their banners and defeated the Targaryens. That's nonsense, Robb. History is written by the victors, and most of it is lies. I have read the accounts of the rebellion. Robert Baratheon was wounded and fled to Stony Sept. Connington arrived there first. He should have burnt the entire town down. If he killed Robert, the rebellion was over. The Stormlands would yield, and Rhaegar would have won at the Trident. Would you have burnt down Stony Shore to win the war? Yes. If we killed Tywin, Joffrey's reign would end. The Lannister army would break apart, and no one could stop us from marching on King's Landing. Tywin never gave us a final battle. At the God's Eye, he was not on the field, but we made plenty of other mistakes. I made mistakes. As the commander, the fault is mine. I should have kept Jaime and Theon under closer watch. That would have made a difference, but our problems were more basic. The black cat came out of the darkness and purred as it brushed against Jon's arm. We needed allies. In the rebellion, the North joined the Riverlands, the Vale and the Stormlands. The Rivermen had already lost before our army passed the neck. The singers make wild claims about the Knights of the Vale. But we saw how Sir Michael fought at the God's Eye. If we had 7,000 Vale men, we might have won decisively at the Red Fork. How could we have gotten more men? Robb asked. Gold bribes, marriages. You met with Renly Baratheon at Bitterbridge. He had an army of 70,000. You came back with 3 swords and a healer. Good men and women, to be sure, but not enough to change the outcome of a battle. Renly was wounded in the attack by Stannis' shadow. Taxley would not have allowed me to take any troops. Robb protested. That was a decision for the Tyrells, not Lord Tyrell. It is unfortunate that Renly didn't die immediately. If he had, you could have fallen into Lady Margaery's arms. We would have destroyed Tywin Lannister on the field. Even a few thousand could have cut off their escape. The Valaman could have provided those forces. A single house from the Reach has those numbers. I should have wooed a Hightower, or a red wine, but I didn't meet any in the south. You met the Rose of Highgarden. You would make a good match for her. In return, she and her grandmother could help you deal with Southron alliances. Lady Margaery was married, and I was unconscious for a week. I lost another week in useless feasts. Bad luck. I think I would have convinced Renly and the Tyrells that I was no threat, but I never understood why he preferred to act as a king, rather than just march his army to King's Landing. There was no need to waste any time on a meaningless siege of Storm's End. We all make mistakes. Renly's errors cost him his life, and mine cost me dearly. I see Talisa in my dreams. I cannot forget 7 streams. Then don't. That which does not kill us makes us stronger, but only if we learn from the past. Honor your wife and child by ruling the North well. I will try, for those we lost in the Riverlands. For father and mother, for Talisa and the babe, Robb said. That's all you can do. The lords respect you. But that is not enough. Not if we have to fight again. We should find more allies through trade. Is your work ready to be revealed? Jon smiled. Aye, just in time for the weddings. Robb laughed. That would make the castle more festive. After many moons of hard work, they would begin to see the fruits of their labor. House Stark gathered in the Solar. The Citadel had sent a white raven, announcing the arrival of autumn, and the timing was excellent. The preparations were almost complete for the harvest feast, which would be followed by 3 days and nights of weddings. The Great Hall of Winterfell was packed full with long tables and a multitude of chairs. Servants decorated the walls with fresh flowers and wreaths festooned with pine cones and holly berries. The smell of delicious cooking wafted through the entirety of the keep: roasted venison and boar, goose and berries, salmon, and even lobster. Singers, musicians, acrobats, and jugglers were ready to perform their songs and feats. Every house in Highborn in the north, even Lady Dustin of Barrowton, had come for the celebration. Robb's biggest problem was his siblings. I am sorry, but that is the seating chart. A frustrated Sansa said of the array of names that had taken her the better part of a day. I don't want to sit next to any Freys, Rickon howled. They killed Mother. Why can't I stay with Jon and Robb? Rickon, you are with the other boys under 10 named days. None of those here knew about Lord Walder's plots. Sansa's explanation received a derisive snort from Arya. I want Shaggy at the dinner table, Rickon said mutinously. Sweetling, your wolf scares the other children, Sansa replied. That was true. Shaggy Dog turned feral after Rickon had learned that Mother and Father would never return to Winterfell. The wolf had bitten the head cook Gage when Rickon was denied a steak pie. Shaggy only behaved well in the Godswood with his brothers, and that was because Summer and Ghost could curb his anger. Ghost will come to the feast. He can keep Shaggy and Summer company, Jon said. Robb was glad that his brother had not mentioned Nymeria. She was the fiercest of them all, and the terror of the courtyard. Bran, I placed you next to Jusian and Mira Reed and House Serwyn. Sansa's words barely registered as Bran just stared off into the distance. As for you, Arya, I am not sitting next to any stupid girls. If I have to go, I will stay with Jon. Robb hid his smile before putting on a more serious face. Margar can sit at the high table, and so should you, Sansa. The North must know that the Starks are united. And what if Arya throws food at me? Again, it was just one blood orange on your fancy dress, and pigeon pie, and some mashed turnips. Robb sighed. Arya, don't throw food at your sister tonight. Do that when our guests are not around. Sansa, I really don't see why I need to sit so close to Yosi or Royce. I would prefer to speak with Lord Yowen. Sansa opened her mouth, surprised. But he clearly wishes for closer ties between our families. Yaxla is friendly and ready to be wed. You need an heir. I have an heir. Jon is my heir. Talisa only died 6 moons ago at the Twins. I will marry again, but not soon. Robb snapped back. Lord Royce brought his daughter here for a reason. Yaxla is kind and sweet. One day, her father might be regent of the Vale. Robb shrugged. I am thankful for the knights that came with Ser Robb to fight, but the Vale still follows the Iron Throne. Things can change. Lord Janos was great friends with our father. He is well respected, and he clearly has no love for the Lannisters if he comes north to see his son married and become a northern lord, Sansa said. That does not mean he will rebel, though. Oaths matter a great deal in the Vale. Thanks to Lady Lysa, Baelish is regent of the Vale. We would need Baelish to die, and House Royce to break ties with House Arryn. What will he do that if another war breaks out? Jon said. Lord Royce is the most likely lord to support House Stark. He was knighted at the Eyrie when our father was fostered with Jon Arryn. Courting him weakens Baelish. In the Vale, they respect strength and bravery. House Royce has a long history of both. Sansa argued, this doesn't matter. Words came out in a rush from Bran. None of this matters. Not the harvest feast. Not young Royce. Not the northern lords. When the snows come and the white winds blow, our allies will fall away like wheat before a scythe. The cold ones are coming. The center cannot hold. When death comes, only fire and ice will matter. Brienne, the others are a story. No one has seen them for 1,000 years, Robb said. The White Walkers will return. I have seen this in my dreams. Tell them, Jon, you have visions too. Tell them what is coming. Bran said in a fevered voice, Winter is coming, and terrible things may come with it. But it is not winter yet. Jon said, It is autumn, Bran. We may still have time to prepare. Have you seen the others, Jon? Robb asked. I have seen shadows that disappear in mist and pale blue eyes underwater. Jon said cautiously, But I wonder if I dreamt of the past. Brienne, I want to believe you, Robb added, but I can't do much with a legend from the Age of Heroes. I can't even tell my lords they will not believe me until a real threat appears. By then, it will be too late, Brienne said bitterly. Maybe, but until then, life goes on. Many lords have come to Winterfell for the feast. Robb must honor them and keep their loyalty. There are marriages to perform and lands to grant. These may be small things, but they matter. The small folk, the visitors from the Vale, the soldiers that fought bravely in the Riverlands, they all matter. If the winter to come is as deadly as Bran believes, this may be the last harvest feast they will ever see, Jon said. I hope that is not a true prophecy, Snow. Maester Luwin says this summer was 10 years and 2 moons and 16 days. Who knows how long the winter will last? I will sit near Lady Royce. I will be courteous and respectful. I will dance with her if asked. But I cannot promise my hand when we are unsure of the situation in the Vale. But you have my thanks, Sansa. The North needs allies and Winterfell needs to keep our lords loyal. I know that now. And the North needs to celebrate. Let us enjoy this harvest feast, Robb said. At the Citadel, the Maesters claimed that the North was a hard and cold place, haunted by the specter of winter. Most of these supposed experts had never passed the neck. The few that had wrote of harsh justice, fearsome storms, strange legends, and terrors from beyond the wall. No wonder that Southrons thought Northmen a grim and merciless bunch. To be fair, that might be true in the long winters, where older men often left home to preserve food for their younger kin. But today was the harvest feast, and thoughts of hunger and famine did not cross the minds of the people at Winterfell. In the great hall, a warm fire crackled, and wisps of fragrant wood smoke mingled with the rich smell of fresh bread and roast meats. The long rows of trestle tables had been jammed to the sides to create a wide open space for men and women to mingle and tat. The floor was swept and watered, the lamps trimmed, and the chamber was snug, warm, and dry, decorated with flowers, wreaths, and banners. The grey dire wolf of House Stark dominated the walls, but many sigils were given a place of honor, including new ones from the Riverlands and the Valemen. The feast at Winterfell lacked the majesty and pageantry of celebrations at the Red Keep or High Garden, but that was inconsequential to the attendees. The food was hearty and filling rather than dainty and luxurious. Roast venison, honeyed chicken, racks of lamb, hard-boiled eggs, and sausage, melted cheese with mushrooms on hot bread, smoked ham steak, onion soup, fried potato cakes, fish pies, mince and pork pies, stuffed squash, all washed down with tasty nut brown ale. There were no pigeons flying out of pies, covered with spoonfuls of lemon cream. That sort of gaudy display was best left for Southerners. Jon sat with the older Stark children, between Arya and Robb at the high table. On Robb's left, Sansa chatted with Lady Isil, while Bronze Jon sat next to Arya. Behind them stood their guards, Saintier Clegane, Brienne of Tarth, and Beric Dondarrion. The Lightning Lord, unlike his friend Thoros of Myr, had no need of any sustenance. In the tables nearest to the Starks, the greatest of the Northern Lords, the Great Jon, Rickard, Maege, and Wyman, made ribald remarks to the knights waiting to be married. In the center of the hall, a few brave souls danced to singers playing harps and reciting ballads. Jon smiled at the sight of Ser Wylis cutting a jig with his wife, Leona Woolfield, a plump blonde with a round, pink, fleshy face. The fat knight was surprisingly graceful on his feet. Their daughters, brown-haired Winefred and green-haired Wyla, hooted loudly at their parents' antics, and the Mormonts slammed tankards in approval. Jon stood up when Robb gave the steward a brief nod. He handed a note to Chet, who nodded and rushed to the rear exit. The music halted, and as Robb rapped a spoon on a goblet, the floor slowly cleared as men and women returned to their seats. Lord Mietzl and Lady Maya, you may approach. The young couple rose and walked hand in hand. They were garbed plainly, but with elegance. A red and white surcoat for the knight, and a blue and gray dress that matched her dark hair and deep blue eyes. They knelt with respect before the high table. Lord Stark, we ask that, before we are wed, that Maya and I take a new name to start our house. And what name have you chosen? Robb asked. Whitestone, my lord. Maya replied, gazing at her betrothed with adoration. It was a good choice. The words of House Redfort were as strong as stone. So stone honored Meechel's history as well as Minya's bastard heritage. And now that they lived in the north, white was more fitting than red. Your wish is granted, Lord Waitstone. Are there any others who wish to take a new name? Robb asked. I am happy to be Sarah Royce of the Weeping Water. Rosier, Yair. Many of the Valemen agreed, simply adding a new place name to create a cadet branch. Sarah Tullet asked if he could name a town after himself, so he could be the Tullet of Tullet Town. Very well. As you marry, I will grant the new fiefdoms. House Stark is pleased to host these weddings at the Godswood and the Sept, so you can pledge faith to the north before the old gods and the new. I thank you for your loyalty and service in the past battles and the wars yet to come, and House Stark has a gift, Robb announced, before turning to Jon. Jon raised his hand, and the great doors of oak and iron opened. Wintertown boys rolled forward a dozen casks. They were half the size of an average wine barrel. Chet brought forth several bottles full of a brown liquid darker than amber. A dozen glasses were placed on the table. Jon began to pour one bottle out. Lord and Lady Whitstone, please join me. He handed each of them a half-full glass. Maxwell gulped it down, and then coughed, his face turning slightly red. Meixel eyed the dark brown, and then sipped it slowly, letting the liquid linger over her red lips and tongue. She rubbed Meixel on the back as the knight recovered and looked at the bottle in wonder. "That is like nothing I have had before," Meixel said. "It tastes like liquid sunshine," Mayak said as she savored her glass. Jon smiled. "Who here enjoys a strong drink? Come forth." Harry and Karstark jumped up, as did the small Jon. Both waited sheepishly as their lord fathers got up in a more stately fashion. The Manderlys bought a full cup to their seated patriarch, and Chet discreetly poured drams for the Tullys and other rivermen. More and more knights made their way over, as did Asha, Greyjoy, and the Mormont ladies, and the leaders of the mountain clans. "What have you created?" "This is nectar for the gods," Thoros of Myr asked. Jon stifled a smile. Before he had dedicated himself to the Lord of Light, the Red Priest could outdrink even King Robert. As Gendry said, they were prodigious sots and gluttons. "I call it whiskey. Be careful. This is 10 times stronger than ale and 5 times more potent than strong wine," Jon cautioned. "And that makes it strong enough for me." The small Jane chortled as he emptied the glass in one guzzle. When he finished, he looked around hopefully for another. No one, certainly not his father or the Karstarks, was willing to share. "It burns pleasantly in the throat. But Snow, you have only poured out from a single cask. What do the other barrels hold? Have you only served us the good whiskey and are hiding the weaker brew?" Ashiok Greyjoy demanded, brandishing her empty cup like an axe. "There is no bad whiskey. There are only some whiskeys not as good as others, but these are very good." Jon pointed to the different barrels as he spoke. Bourbon made primarily from corn. Whiskey from malted barley. Some were triple distilled with a mix of malted and unmalted. These were aged in an ironwood barrel, rather than white oak. Others have honey added or have been distilled with wine or fruit. Each has its own flavors. "This is a splendid gift for our new house, Lord Snow. Michael and I are grateful for something so new and different. We will remember these drinks as an excellent beginning." "Mates, this is not your gift. Robe would not give you a niggling prize of a few barrels of drink for your wedding," Jon said to her surprise. He made a sweeping gesture to the Wintertown boys. "This is the gift, the art of making whiskey, so that you and Sarah Robar and the other new lords can produce bottles and barrels of whiskey for trade. Clydas, tell her how this was made." The boy beamed at Lady Mates. 3 parts corn with 1 part a mix of barley and wheat. The finest pure water from Long Lake, distilled twice, where we throw out the first parts and keep the mids. Normally we age the good runs straight into charred oak barrels. What makes this special is that the maester showed us how to filter before the barrel. I took young sugar maple, soaked it in whiskey, then set the wood on fire to become charcoal. I filtered the whiskey with the pellets. That is why it is so smooth, and then we age the whole lot in white oak. Jon took pity on Lord Meixel's stunned expression. "You do not need to know all the details. Cleidos will come with you to the Dreadfort and serve as master distiller. Other Wintertown boys will join the new lords in the holdfasts and castles along the Weeping Water." "Maester Snow, how large could this trade become?" a shrewd Lord Wyman asked. Jerry, prompted by Jon, spoke. "We believe each carrack can hold 300 barrels. That would take less than half of the storage space. Each barrel is the equal of 300 bottles. So a trading ship can start with 90,000 bottles of whiskey. As to the price of a bottle..." Jon held up an unopened bottle to the crowd, and the setting sun glinted through the dark yellow. "The Arbor is the richest land of the 7 kingdoms. They have grapes, and we do not. But this libation is stronger than wine, and richer in taste. I believe men would pay a dozen silver stags, perhaps more, for a single drink. Each bottle may be worth a gold dragon. That means a ship can carry 90,000 gold dragons of whiskey and still have room for more trade." The Great Hall turned silent. The Vale of Arryn and the Riverlands exported fish and grain with a bit of marble and beeswax. Neither had the gold and silver of the Westerlands or the wine and rare fruits of the Reach and Dorne. Contrary to popular belief, the North had resources, sheep, furs, stone, iron, and possibly even silver in the mountains, and an abundance of timber, particularly ancient oaks and valuable ironwood. But with such a vast expanse of land, few people, and almost no roads or ships, the North was a poor place. A lord, even a Manderly, might not see so much gold in their lifetime. Asha Greyjoy broke the silence. Snow, a single ship could carry 100,000 gold dragons of trade. Is that truly possible? Not yet. It will take time. This whiskey was aged in small barrels. A proper barrel would take longer, a year, maybe two. But then the drink might taste better with greater age. And on the first voyages, we would need to find markets and convince merchants and lords the value of whiskey. Braavosi, Pentos, Ibn, the cities on the summer sea. When the Lannisters no longer rule, we may trade with Old Town and Sunspear. The sea captains may have to sell the barrels more cheaply to begin. But yes, one day, a single shipment of whiskey may be worth close to 100,000 dragons, and our fleet will profit from that, Jon said. Why give such a great prize to the Valemen? What about the lords who have served you in battle? Rogier Glover cried, conveniently forgetting that Mikhail and his kinsmen had acquitted themselves far better than any Glover in the Riverlands. My lords, Robb held up his hand. Jon and I have spoken. We will share the secrets further with those we trust. But let me make this clear. House Stark could have kept this knowledge. We could have brewed all we wanted at the castle. We chose to share. Another reason is that the whiskey depends on the water and wood. Jon believes the weeping water will produce a fine drink. It may be that Bear Island Carehold or the Last Hearth may suit. We do not know. And finally, whiskey will be taxed by the barrel. That gold will flow to Winterfell. Jon Snow continued, and the gold will flow through the north. Making whiskey requires white oak, ironwood, hickory, and sugar maple trees. The distilleries need barley, corn, and wheat, and we will have ships, and those ships require even more. Iron from the mountains, rope, canvas. The ships that pick up barrels will dock at White Harbor, and those ships will not be full. There will be plenty of room for furs, wool, timber, iron, steel, and most importantly, cloth. All of the lords will benefit. Jon now held the attention of the entire room. When winter comes, the north cannot sow and reap. But everywhere that men and women drink, they will pay for whiskey. That gold will buy grain and meat and feed us when it is cold. At the last battle, my brother promised that he would reward you, and he has. In time, our lands will become rich. The north will never starve again, Robb said solemnly. Then the Lord of Winterfell smiled. But tonight, the harvest feast is upon us. Let us give thanks and welcome those from the south. And let us... He paused dramatically. Finish all the whiskey. The cheering that followed was raucous indeed. The guests made merry long into the night, until the lamps had lost all their light and all the food was consumed. The Greyjohn and Karstarks sang northern ballads, the Manderlys and the Flints danced to the fiddle, pipes and drums. The Wintertown boys tried their best to distribute the whiskey evenly among the lords and knights. Everyone drank. Even Sansa was persuaded to have a few drams. Robb, as Lord of Winterfell, danced with Rosalind Tully, Maya Whitstone, Arwen Royce, and Ysilla Royce. Jon gifted the Royces a dozen casks for the cellars of Runestone. He promised Big Bucket Wall that the Starks would build a distillery in the mountains along the Bay of Ice to use the pristine, pure snowmelt for the clans. He pledged to Lord Wyman that samples of many different bourbons and whiskeys would be sent to White Harbor for a Manderly tasting. Jon spent much of the night in pleasant talk with Arya and Lord Jan, laughing at the antics of others as the revelers sang and capered the hours away. Only one thing marred the happiness of the Starks that night. After dessert, Jerry brought Jon a raven that arrived from Dragonstone. Stannis Baratheon demanded that the Starks bend the knee to the rightful king of Westeros. Robb Stark grimaced and tossed the letter into the fire. The South, like every morning that she could remember, Marjorie woke up to the sight of a rose, a large blazon, hung on the wall. The golden rose in a field of green of House Tyrell. Roses dominated the chamber. She slept in a silk nightgown embroidered in roses and under linen sheets covered with roses. She washed her face from a silver pitcher and basin adorned with roses. Even her bed companions, Mary Crane and Lady Bulwer, wore brooches of a gold rose to show their loyalties, and not the sigils of their own houses. The two ladies-in-waiting were still asleep, snoring softly in bed. At Highgarden, they would already be up, awoken by a horde of stewards and maids. At the Red Keep, that was doubly true, as her father was eager to flaunt the wealth and glory of their house. Only velvet, satin, and sable would do, and handmaidens spent hours adding volume and heft to her curly brown hair, and selecting the finest garments so that Marjorie's youth and beauty would outshine Cersei. That was not necessary here. The Tyrells no longer stayed at the Maiden Vault. After the debacle of the Wildfire Wedding, Lady Olenna refused to abide in a castle ridden with secret passages and tunnels. The Tyrells and their closest retainers settled in a compound near the Iron Gate, at the northern entrance of King's Landing, overlooking Blazewater Bay. The 5 houses taken over by the Reach were watched by hundreds of sentries, hand-picked from the veteran guardsmen of Highgarden. 5,000 more men, heavily armed and armored, camped outside the North Gate, under the command of her brother, Ser Garlen. That seemed like a large number, but it wasn't. As Queen Terenzier, she presided over a host of 80,000 at Bitterbridge, 1/4 cavalry and the rest infantry. 30,000 Tyrell soldiers joined the Lannister army to fight the Starks at the God's Eye, and now they only had a paltry 7,000 men in the city. The Reach still had a vast army. The Tyrells simply could not rely on these forces. Not even those pledged to lords that shared blood with her family. Marjorie knew why. On the day the prisoners returned from the Twins, the royal court assembled in the still-damaged Great Hall. Joffrey, seated on a makeshift throne, chided the men for their capture. He then declared to the stony-faced knights and lords that they were released only because the North feared the wrath of the Iron Throne, the same chair that was now an ugly pile of gray slag, melted by wildfire. Finally, Joffrey demanded that the former captives return back to the battlefield and bring him Robb Stark's head. Ser Bediaeler broke the silence. The heir to the High Tower informed Joffrey and the small council that a deal had been struck with Jon Snow, guaranteeing peace for the Riverlands. The Reach would return to the Trident, not as invaders, but to protect the small folk and to stop looting and banditry. Further, the Stark army had headed back to Winterfell, and with the Blackfish holding the Twins, an assault on the Neck was dubious at best, and very likely futile. House Hightower would take no part in any attack on the north. Joffrey sputtered in rage. The Tyrells, like many in the Great Hall, were not surprised. Ravens from Harroway and Sulpens outlined that the fighting had ended. Rumors reached the city that the Stark army departed the Riverlands, but Snow threatened to kill anyone who violated the truce. The faiths celebrated, claiming their prayers to the father and the mother were answered. Still, Margaery had not expected to see Joffrey rebuked so publicly. It was one thing to hear whispers and read letters. It was quite another when Baelor Hightower dictated the terms of peace to the boy king in the throne room. Joffrey's face turned bright red, and he shrieked for the guards. Lord Tywin countermanded the order. There were 100 Lannister men in the Great Hall, but also Dornish spears in red and orange and Tyrell swords under cloaks of green. Margaery knew that an arrest would have been disastrous. Ser Baelor had a splendid reputation as a fighter, a leader, and a gracious ally. Just as important, he had 9 brothers and sisters. Not all were married, but many were, and their relatives were scattered throughout the Reach. Margaery's mother, Allery, was Baelor's sister, second daughter of Lord Leighton. House Rowan, House Florent, and House Redwine were only a few of the many houses honor-bound to defend the High Towers. Before matters could escalate, Sir Caven stepped forward. 2 Westermen dragged out a great chest on a hand-barrow. Initials had been burnt on the top with hot iron, but the letters were faded and worn down. The corners were smashed and dented and the ancient lock broken, replaced by loops of rope. Sir Caven moved the rope aside and threw open the lid. A horrible stench filled the room, the smell of rotting meat, rancid eggs, and human dung. Charred skulls and hands were stacked high, a noxious pile that confirmed the taking of the Twins. The remains of the Freys. The top skull belongs to Lord Walder. Kevin took out a large woolen bag streaked with dark red and brown. This is for the Martells. Oberyn pulled down the bag, revealing a monstrous mummified head. The hair was mostly burnt off, the brow heavy like a beetle, the jutting jaw massive. Cleganee's bull-like neck had been hacked cleanly off. Shards of clay and glass were still embedded in the burnt and cracked skin, and the dumb, brutish eyes were frozen in fear. The mountain had died a horrible death. I would proclaim you a friend of Dorne, Sir Kevin, but I doubt this was your idea. A gift from Maester Snow? Oberyn walked off before the Lannister knight could nod. Yes. The Prince of Dorne held up the ghastly trophy with every sign of pleasure, and his daughters crowded around to get a better glimpse. Joffrey covered his nose, mouth and eyes with pasty white hands to ward against the sight and smell of House Frey. "Seal the chest. Get it away from here," he yelled. After a long moment, Sir Kevin closed the box, but it remained in front of the king. "We plan to depart the city, Your Grace. Hightower soldiers will guard the Riverlands from any invaders," Baelor announced, his eyes locked with Lord Tywin. The hand of the king grunted. "Court is adjourned." Only then did the Red Cloaks move to take the bones out of the room. In the moons that followed, Marguerite was glad that the Tyrells had left the Maiden Vault. Initially, she worried that she would not spend enough time at the castle to beguile the king. But Lord Tywin insisted that the royal couple go hawking along the Blackwater or riding in the Kingswood. During those excursions, under the watchful eyes of both Lannisters, Tyrells and guards, Joffrey behaved with perfect courtesy. He smirked, simpered and made vacuous remarks, lauding the chivalry of the Reach. Marguerite followed suit, smiling and praising Joffrey on the glorious history of his father and house. She certainly did not mention that Joffrey looked nothing like a stag, lacking the powerful frame, black hair, blue eyes, and square jaws of the Baratheons. Outside those pleasure trips, Joffrey found it harder to maintain the facade. He could barely contain his anger at the Reachmen, and particularly the Hightowers and the Tarleys. He snapped at the captives from the Westerlands, as many knights and squires only wished to return home. As for the Stormlands, a few houses followed Stannis, but most lords kept their knights and men back on their lands, hunkered down in castles. Even Lord Estermont, uncle of Robert, Stannis and Renly through his sister Cassana, ignored the ravens from the Iron Throne. The Tyrells had left the Red Keep, but gold, whores, and wine uncovered plenty of secrets in King's Landing. The stories were troubling, to say the least. Garland had verified the death of the butcher's boy at the Trident, cut down by the Hound at Joffrey's orders. Courtiers confirmed that Sansa Stark was stripped half-naked and beaten after the capture of the Kingslayer and the seizure of the Golden Tooth. There were older tales, too, and darker. Tommen had adopted a fawn as a pet, but Joffrey killed the creature and forced his sobbing brother to wear the skin as a jerkin. Tommen, a plump, pleasant boy of only 8 named days, was terrified of Joffrey. That struck Marguerite as quite disturbing. Her family had their faults, but her brothers and parents loved her and each other. Only the 7 knew what Joffrey had done to Tommen. Marguerite knew that life was not a song. She never expected a love as true as her brother Loras held for Renly. But she did not want to marry another Maegor the Cruel. That king had 6 wives, 4 of which died horribly. The first sign of Maegor's persona came in his treatment of animals. When he was 8, Maegor stabbed to death a palfrey that had kicked him, and nearly killed the stable boy in charge of the horse. Joffrey's nature was less warlike, but just as cruel, prodding others to do his dirty deeds, and the boy king also enjoyed abusing and killing animals. No, Marguerite was not pleased. The Tyrell courtyard overlooked the bay. Servants rushed about the garden, carrying pitchers of drinks and trays of food for breakfast. Honey cakes with jam, soft boiled eggs, and buttermilk biscuits rested on the long trestle table. As the future queen of the 7 kingdoms, Marguerite could claim the place of honor. In private, she always gave that to her mother, and Lady Aellery deferred to Olenna. That queen of thorns glared at an embarrassed steward. "Look at this cheese." The source of Olenna's derision sat on a wooden board, dripping with sweat like a pig. Mina Tyrell, Marjorie's aunt, and married to Lord Redwine, had sent her mother the sheep milk cheese, layered with truffles, rolled in dried flowers, and aged in underground caves near Vintown. Already the cheese turned greasy and flaccid, the surface beaded with drops of fat. By the afternoon it would melt into a shapeless puddle, the blue veins turning black. "It still tastes delicious," Aellery said defensively. Margaery's mother always made the best out of a bad situation, a quality that did not endear her to the acerbic Tyrell matriarch. "I can't eat this. Take it away." Olenna put her knife down. "Why is the city so damn hot? I thought winter was coming." "It is the currents. The fluxion from the summer sea reverses in autumn, carrying warm water north and west. The change in temperature brings storms to the Sea of Dorne and Shipbreaker Bay. Some say the warmth circulates as far as the Bay of Seals." I wrote a scroll on the subject for a pewter link. Gorman puffed up. Her father's uncle had traveled from Old Town to plead to be appointed the new Grand Maester. All he had achieved was to bore the other Tyrells to tears. Fascinating. Ask your nephew Mace to read the scroll. No doubt his mind is hungry for such instruction. The Queen of Thorns turned her attention to a new wheel of white cheddar. King's Landing was sweltering, hotter than the worst day in Highgarden. The Tyrell Castle was further south, but cooled off by the Mander River. Marjorie sat down on Lady Olenna's left, and delicately broke apart the fluffy bread into bite-sized pieces. Before she could butter the biscuit, her cousin plopped down next to her, eyes red from crying. "Eleanor, whatever is the matter?" Margar asked. "It's Alan. He doesn't love me anymore," the willowy girl sobbed. Actually, Ambrose and Eleanor Tyrell were to be wedded that afternoon. A canopy had been built in the mansion's garden, where the winds from the water blew over the city walls. A sheet of ivory samite was stretched over 4 poles, decorated with white, pink, and golden roses. 2 shields hung interlocked, the rose of Highgarden and the red ants of Ambrose. "How could that be? The boy adores you," Allery said, shocked. Aline and Eleanor were betrothed when the boy was squired to Sir Garland. The engagement had a provision for the two to marry when he became either a knight or a lord. Upon the return of the Reach prisoners, Garland commended his squire's bravery in battle, and knighted Sir Olin in the royal sept. "I do not know, Aunt. He says that he cannot make me happy, that he feels incomplete." Eleanor wailed. Olenna gestured with her hand like scissors snipping thread. "So Snow cut off his—" "Grandmother," Marjorie cried as Eleanor blushed dark red and Allery cringed. "What? It is a reasonable question. When a man isn't excited to marry a pretty girl, you wonder whether his parts work. Jon Snow seems to enjoy chopping hands and cocks off. He only cut off 1 hand and 1 cock," Marjorie said, "that we know of. If all his parts are working, why is Cyrillin acting like an ass?" Marjorie consoled the rather emotional Eleanor. "He feels guilty, grandmother. Many Reachmen died at the God's Eye. He does not believe he has earned the knighthood." "Oh, for goodness sakes, bring Cyrillin here. I will speak with him." "Is that a good idea?" asked timidly, quite aware of Olenna's famous tact. Olenna just snorted and nibbled the cheese. Eleanor came back soon with her betrothed, Sir Garland, a frown marring his genial face, also escorted the two. The Queen of Thorns put down her cheese fork again. "Well, Sir, is my grandniece not good enough for you?" No, Lady Olenna, I love her with all my heart. She is too good for me." "Then what is the problem?" The boy gulped. "I hope to win my knighthood through feats of valor on the field. My lady bestowed her favor on me before the God's Eye. I thought it would make me fearless. A bolt of cloth adorned with a rose. How did you expect that to make any difference? Did you attack Robb Stark or his dire wolf with the handkerchief? I know that now. The Northmen killed my horse with a javelin in the first charge. I fell on the ground. By the time I got up, we were overrun. I yielded to a woman in plate mail with a steel morning star. I did nothing in the battle. There is no shame in losing one fight. If there is fault, then place it on me. The God's Eye was my first command. You fought as well as you could. Lyanna, Garland said. Still, I failed the Reach. I am not worthy, Lyanna lamented. You did not fail. You survived. Olenna said forcefully, there is more to knighthood than survival. Perhaps, if you are alive, but for the dead, not much matters. Olenna took hold of the boy's hand, forcing him to look down. What do you know of Tydos Lannister? Lord Tywin's father. Alan hesitated. They say he was not a strong ruler. Tyros was a third son, and never knighted, despite serving as a squire for many years. Tyros's father had 4 sons. The first 2, Tyrosald and Tuasin, were tall, handsome, brave, Gerald's glorious twins. One even squired for Crown Prince Aegon the Unlikely. Tyrosald died at the Peak Uprising, fighting for King Maekar. Tyrosen followed him to the grave 3 years later. What is the point of the story, my lady? Survival is important, sir. Had either twin lived, no one would give a shit about Tywin Lannister. He would be a minor knight or at best, a Castellan. Titus became Lord of the Rock because he outlived his brothers. You are alive. You survived the wolves. Be thankful for that. Alan considered her words. I lived only because House Stark was merciful. Robb Stark spoke out against any mistreatment of prisoners, Snow released us when we swore oaths to protect the riverlands. Better lucky than dead. You would be freezing your arse in the north. Now go be happy. There are worse things than wedding Eleanor, silly goose that she is." The happy couple left, hand in hand, chattering about the events of that night. Marguerite thought for a long time about Olenna's words. She was a rose of high garden. To be queen, she had to survive the lions and snakes of King's Landing. That would take more than sweet smiles and food for the poor. Marguerite needed thorns. One power could keep Joffrey and the Iron Throne in check. She had to find a way to bargain with the North. All roads lead to the Iron Bank of Braavos. Tyrion set aside the parchment and closed the 3 thick leather-bound books. The ledgers were as massive as the largest tome written by the Archmaesters, and contained the crown's finances for the past decade. He would need Podrick to refill the pot of ink that he had used up in the past 5 hours, examining the many figures that flowed in and out of the treasury. Tyrion had been working on this for weeks, poring over Littlefinger's work. The ledgers made for an intricate puzzle. Gold dragons came and went. Assets, brothels, ships, quarries, mines, and bakeries were bought and sold, yet the debt kept increasing. In the 7 years Baelish was master of coin, the crown's revenues expanded manyfold, but the borrowings by an even greater number. Tracking the flow of money was like chasing a fox into a dark forest. 10 years ago, the crown's debt was simple. Money was owed to Old Town, Highgarden, and Casterly Rock. That changed when Daenerys arrived in King's Landing. Suddenly, funds came in from Essos, Marish money changers, Pentoshi magisters, Valentini slavers, and the Iron Bank. 1 year after the Baelish was appointed to the small council, the flow of gold changed again. The crown did not borrow anymore from Casterly Rock. The main lender was now the Iron Bank. Millions and millions of dragons over the past 5 years. That worried him. A Lannister might pay their debts, but the Iron Bank will have its due. Always. Behind the marble and stone veneer, the Braavosi were as ruthless and implacable as any king or lord. Tyrion wondered, not for the first time, whether Littlefinger was a secret agent for the Iron Bank. Not many knew, but House Baelish's true sigil was not a mockingbird, but the stone no of the Titan of Braavos. But that did not make sense. If the throne failed, the Iron Bank would lose an enormous amount. If the throne flourished, all the Iron Bank received would be their own gold plus interest. There was some value there, but not enough to justify the enormous amount of dragons. Tyrion also doubted that Baelish worked well with others. The man was a treacherous snake, who cared only about himself. Whatever game Littlefinger played was for his benefit, not a bank 1,000 miles away across the narrow sea. Tyrion looked over the austere quarters. The White Sword Tower was raised and the Tower of the Hand uninhabitable. He would have been happy to share the kitchen keep with Jaime, but not his father's men, particularly after the news about Taksha. So Tyrion had taken over Varys' apartments, 3 snug rooms near the north wall. The lodgings had 2 hidden exits. The door behind the hearth had been found and blocked off. There was another that remained secret. With a latch, the stone bed could float up and reveal a staircase. The steps led to a cave where Varys hid a rowboat, with fresh water and dried rations. A crafty escape route, but the eunuch was dead. Killed by Jon Snow in the tunnels. So much for cleverness. Varys' little birds had disappeared as well. But Tyrion was too preoccupied to realize what that meant. Lord Tyrion, Podrick Payne made his way past the guards with Bran at his back. No signs of Baelish. None, my lord. The Merling King docked at the wharves. It took on some horrors as cargo and will depart for Braavos. The other ship, the Windwitch, headed to Gulltown. There was no one on board that could have been Lord Baelish, Pod said. We went to all 4 of his brothels. No sign of Littlefinger. He hasn't been in the city since your wedding, Bran added. That had been 7 moons ago. In the confusion, Baelish had sailed for the Vale immediately. He claimed that he needed to attend to Lady Lysa and govern the Vale. If rumors were true, Littlefinger spent most of his time on the first, and precious little on the second. Baelish was not loved by the Vale lords. Very well, I hope to ask Boxley's questions, but I will attend the meeting regardless. The small council was now a smaller council, still missing a Master of Whispers and a Grand Maester. His sister stood as Queen Regent for her son, a thankful reprieve from Joffrey's vicious temper and sudden outbursts. Joffrey was concerned only with the Kingsguard. noting that Sir Lyx Crakehall and Sir Robert Brax had taken well to their new roles. Uncle Kevin was capable but obedient, following Tywin's lead. As for Tyrion, he refrained from quips or clever remarks. Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than talk and remove all doubt. Mace Tyrell was proving the truth of that expression. The fat Lord of Highgarden prattled on about how the Reach was eager for Margaery's wedding, and that once the lords saw the royal couple happily wed, they would be eager to prove themselves as loyal servants. Such poppycock might have pleased Cersei, but Tyrion doubted anyone else was fooled. Joffrey was the suitor, better seen from far away. From 100 feet, he looked like the model of gallantry. Close up, he was a spoiled brat of low intellect and poor judgment. Joffrey did not improve upon acquaintance. "What of the news from the Iron Islands?" Lord Tywin asked. A flummoxed Mace gulped. "The Iron Islands?" "Yes, the Iron Islands. You are the master of ships. Are you not? You are aware of the Iron Fleet?" Mace's mouth gaped open, like he was trying to swallow an entire stuffed quail. Tyrion took pity on the overmatched lord. At the docks, the captains talked of the Greyjoys. "The Greyjoys?" Mace asked, perplexed. Tywin lost any patience. "Yes, the Greyjoys. A moon ago, Balon Greyjoy died. He was crossing a bridge on Pike when the wind ripped it apart. His bloated body washed up 2 days later. Crabs ate his eyes." "Who is the new king of the Iron Islands?" Tyrion asked, ignoring the outrage on Cersei's face that others would dare crown themselves king. "Some Greyjoy. They always are. Before he died, Balon wrote to me, proposing an alliance against the Starks. He wanted the western half of the north." Tywin said. "Did you agree to the alliance?" Cersei asked. "Balon already decided to attack. Why pay someone for what they intended to do? But an enemy of an enemy is good to have. We can still use Balon's heir to weaken the north." Cersei said, "I would not trust the Greyjoys to wipe my arse." Theon Greyjoy turned against the family that raised him. Euramon Greyjoy is said to be mad, and Asha Greyjoy was captured by the Starks. Let the Ironborn raid the north as they like. We need to build war galleys for the royal fleet. The Greyjoys might dare to attack Lannisport or Old Town again. Tywin said, "We have no gold for ships," Tyrion interjected. His father looked up with scorn. "Find some, or else I will get a new master of coin." Tyrion ignored the sniggering of his sister and the concerned looks of his uncle and brother. Mace Tyrell was only too eager to flee the room. He waited patiently as Tyrell signed ravens to Lannister bannermen. No doubt, threats for abandoning the war in the Riverlands. Tyrion did his best to stay calm and collected. His father had always despised him, but Tyrion's own indignation had grown into a great fury since Jaime's confession about Tysha. Still, he would be damned if he gave his father any hint. It would take more than anger to bring down an old lion. "Yes?" Tywin looked up from the stack of parchment. "There is no gold. The crown has the same expenses as before. But 2 kingdoms pay nothing today, the North and the Iron Islands. The Riverlands cannot pay, and the Stormlands are slow in sending taxes. Trade has suffered in every port, so customs and duties are down in Old Town, King's Landing, and Gulltown. How do you expect me to find the money for new warships?" Truthfully, the flow of money had also slowed down from the Reach and the Westerlands. The ransoms paid to the North hurt more than anyone cared to admit. Baelish could find the money. Littlefinger's gold is made from thin air with a snap from his fingers. We already owe the Iron Bank of Braavos enormous sums. I am not a conjurer, and I doubt that he is. The numbers in the ledgers do not add up. They haven't for the last 5 years. Tyrion said. Tywin put down his quill. "Do you mean that he is stealing from the crown?" "I am certain that Baelish is a thief, but that is not my point. The crown's numbers do not add up. In many months, the expenditures are greater than revenues. Even with the borrowings, even with the sales of brothels and warehouses, I have traced all the gold. Baelish comes up with more coins than he should. I cannot make sense of it," Tyrion admitted. The hand of the king barked out a harsh rasp, a sound like a mix between a snort of derision, a cackle, and a dry cough. Tyrion wondered if his father was attempting to laugh. The man was certainly out of practice. "You have always been too proud of your tongue and wit, and pleased to show how clever you are. But in this matter, you do not understand what is going on. I know what Bexley is doing. I have known it for years. Then enlighten me. I am the master of coin. Leave me, Tywin called out to the guards. The 4 red cloaks walked out. Tywin took out 2 gold goblets and poured an equal amount of wine in each. Bring me a scale. Tyrion's fingers touched the pommel of his dagger. They were alone, and the guards would need time to react. There might be no better opportunity to kill his father. But if he attacked now, he would never escape the small council chambers, alive. He would never see Tyaz again or meet his son. No one but Jaime would know why. Tyrion reluctantly took out the merchant's scale, a balance with 2 circular pans. His father spilled a pouch of golden dragons out on the ebony table and sorted the coins into 2 piles. These are dragons from 10 years ago, before Baelish came to King's Landing. Those are dragons minted in the last year. Tell me the difference. Tyrion carefully examined the 2 piles of gold. Despite the rebellion, the coinage of the realms had not changed. One side bore the face and name of the king, and the other, the 3-headed Targaryen. The older stack had a few Aerys II, but most coins showed a young Robert Baratheon. The new coins are larger, not by a great margin, but noticeably so. Tywin snorted. No doubt, Baelish convinced Robert that larger dragons were more manly. His father placed 5 coins of each pile into a goblet. The newer coins displaced more wine, proving that they were indeed a greater size. Now weigh them. Tyrion wiped off the wine with a piece of cloth and placed the coins on the scale. The pan holding the older coins tilted down and hit the table. The smaller coins are heavier. But how that can be, he thought for a moment. The newer coins have less gold. When I was a boy, a silver stag had 5 grams of pure silver. Today, it is less than half. There is more copper and bronze than silver in a stag. Before the rebellion, gold dragons were 90% pure. Baelish's dragons have much less gold. Perhaps a third less. Tyrion's mind whirled with the implications. That is why Baelish borrows from Essos. He takes their gold, melts it, and mints more coins. 100 Braavosi gold pieces becomes 150 dragons. That is the reason the ledgers don't add up. But Baelish pays interest with our gold dragons. Then he realized the consequences. The Iron Bank will kill us. Us? Why us? We knew nothing about this. This is Baelish's mess, and if a king needs to be blamed, it should be Robert the Warmonger, not a Lannister. The Iron Bank will have its due. They may demand that the crown makes them whole through the gold and silver mined in the Westerlands. What gold? Our last gold mine ran out 3 years ago. The silver mines went dry 5 years past. I asked Ep1 to look into Castamere to see if any of the caves and tunnels could produce ore. Nothing. There is no more gold in the Westerlands, Tywin said. The crown owed 3 million dragons to the Lannisters, but even more to Braavos. Tyrion wondered once the secret was known, if the Iron Bank would force the throne to pay them first, before Casterly Rock, the Faith, or Highgarden. And the crown could not pay 1 million dragons, let alone 3. How did Baelish get away with this for so long? Coins in the 7 kingdoms have never been standard. In the Reach, they still use coins stamped with Housegardener. Old Town minted silver moons during the dance. Daemon Blackfire paid followers with his own dragons. And over time, coins get scuffed and marked. Many lords shave their stags and dragons and copper stars, or keep them locked away in chests. Who would have enough coins to compare the old and new? Tywin responded, the Iron Bank only had the new dragons and stags minted in the past 7 years. To them, the coinage had not changed. Highgarden was rich, but the Tyrells enjoyed using Gardener currency. In many places of Westeros, people bartered or happy to accept coins from the free cities. Many small folk would never see a gold dragon in their life. What about Jon Snow? He has enough dragons. A sour look crossed Tywin's face. The bastard might, but people will find out anyway. Envoys from the Iron Bank are already making inquiries. Then we're fucked. Tyrion said bleakly, you still do not understand. The crown sent gold and silver coins to Essos. Those coins have been circulating. The Iron Bank paid others with the same coins. If they raise a hue and cry, then everyone will know that the Braavosi were cheated and that they cheated others. One day, when Baelish causes trouble or the Iron Bank is close to the answer, you will discover his crimes. That day, arrest and execute his men, the warden of the mint, the keeper of the keys, and the king's scales. You will hand Braavosi over to the Iron Bank. The crown will offer his possessions to the Iron Bank, brothels, ships, warehouses, even the fingers. We knew nothing of this. The scheme suited his father. Allow others to do the dirty work so the hands of the great Tywin were kept clean. During the war in the Riverlands, Baelish minted an enormous amount of coin. And why not? Littlefinger could spin gold out of air. That air was really brass, copper, and lead. His father had used that to pay the Lannister army, and now intended to have Tyrion break the news to the Iron Bank. That would be very difficult. He needed a great deal of wine. In the meantime, you need to raise money to pay for the royal wedding. There will be a new tax for you to collect, on brothels. Tyrion knew from the glint in his father's eye that he would not enjoy this conversation. The dwarf's penny, Shatia complained. How can the Imber tax the labors of love? The gods made our bodies so we can mate and give pleasure. Alleras did not think her aunt's brothel had much to do with love, but she could understand the anger of the whores. The small council had imposed a tax on prostitution to pay for the wedding of the king and Margaery Tyrell. The tax was supposedly temporary, but Alleras doubted that claim. Love is imposed by kings or lords rarely disappeared. It is only a penny. Surely that is a small sum compared to the fees for your services. Tyang San said, It is not the amount. It is the principle. Why should the Lannisters earn anything from our aunt's body? Alleras replied. Sweetling, where is your father? Perhaps ye can speak to the small council about this. Probably paying the dwarf's penny as we speak, Tyang quipped. Alleras took her aunt's arm in hand. I will speak to Prince Oberyn, but I do not think he can do much. The small council is controlled by the Lannisters. Her father was not rutting with anyone, boy or girl. Instead, she found him in the turret room. Oberyn sat on the edge of a great canopied bed, staring at the dead eyes of a charred head on top of the tall wardrobe. The mountain's remains clashed with the erotic carvings and ornate screens with patterns of flowers and half-dressed maidens scattered about. Ilaria and the other sand snakes greeted Tiain and Alleras as they walked in. Father, Aunt wants to know why the dwarf is collecting pennies, Tyane said sweetly. Oberyn did not rise to the bait. The Lannisters need money. War is expensive, particularly if you lose, and the crown spends quite a bit. The wedding might be more costly than the war. They say Cersei wants 77 courses for the feast. Women and children go hungry in the city, but Joffrey needs gold plates, silver goblets, and multiple pavilions for his banquet. Illyria said, I bet only 1 or 2 dishes will be Dornish. The rest will be muck like swans poached in saffron, or peacocks served in their feathers, or doves flying out of a pie. Naney added, Alleras was glad that she would not have to attend. Who could possibly eat 77 dishes? There might never again be a wedding so lavish and so tacky, with the Lannisters and Tyrells both willing to showcase their taste for extravagance. Perhaps you should give the Mountain's Head as a wedding gift. It seems to be your favorite thing in King's Landing. Illyria japped. I will not part with it, not until I have the entire set. Lorch is dead. The mountain is dead. But the man who planned the sack of King's Landing is still alive. Why should Tywin escape justice? Aegon and Rhaenys were not the only babes butchered, and he was not the only woman raped and murdered. Tywin is not a lion, he is a hyena, preying on the weak. Tywin will be difficult to kill. He is always surrounded by fully armed and armored guards. He sleeps in Makr's holdfast. It is impossible to get close to him. Ironborn. We all agree that most of the Lannisters are scum, but I do not think that vengeance is the answer. Alyssa said. Oberyn stood up, his viper eyes blazing. Vengeance is not the answer. Vengeance is the question. How and when? Those are the answers. How and when are questions too, Father. And perhaps you should also ask, why? Why pursue this vendetta when your problems will soon be solved? Alleras asked. What do you mean? Speak clearly, daughter. Oberyn was not the only one puzzled. Illyria and the Sand Snakes also looked to Illyrias for an explanation. The Lannisters are teetering. They lost to the Starks in the battlefield. Their bannermen are bitter about being abandoned after the treachery with the Freys. Their greatest problem is this. Tywin's power will soon end. In 2 years, Joffrey reaches his majority. Who will be able to control Joffrey? What happens to the Warden of the West when the king resents his power? You mean set Joffrey against his grandfather so that the Lannisters tear each other apart, Elleria said. Joffrey is a piece of shit. He resents anyone who tries to keep him in check. He believes that Tywin should have defeated the Starks in the war. Mark my words. In a short time, Lord Tywin will regret that he is king. 2 years is too long, Oberyn said dismissively. You have waited 16 years, father. What is another 2? Revenge would taste sweeter if Tywin is destroyed by his own family. We merely need to help things along. One whisper here, a plot there. Set the roses against the lions. Watch the Iron Throne fall apart. We are Dornish. We seek revenge with our own hands, and do not allow others to do our work. I want Lord Tywin to suffer before he dies. Oberyn exclaimed, Then why not ally with the North? They despise Joffrey. You have refused to let me travel to White Harbor, or even send ravens to Winterfell, Ael'Araz said, disappointed. There are more plots at play than you know. Prince Doran has a scheme that may bring down the lions, but the North may object, so we cannot involve them. Oberyn admitted, Prince Doran? What is his great plan? Wait for everyone to die of old age. He has done nothing for 16 years. How much longer before he unveils his secret strategy? Nam snorted. He is still my brother, and your prince. Doran does not wish to waste Dornish blood, but when the time is right, he will strike. Nymeria Sand began to cough. Her already red full lips reddened further with flecks of blood. Alores reached out for her sister. The forehead felt very hot, but worse. There were slight red bumps on the sides of the neck. That was a bad sign. According to the teachings of Maester, Rose. Oberyn gently lowered Nain to the bed and called for hot water and clean towels. I feel so cold and so hot, father. Perhaps I will not see Uncle Doran's master plan at work. Nem closed her eyes, and her ragged breathing slowed. Jaime ignored the angry looks as he rapped on the bars of the penitent's cell. After all, he had not taken an oath of silence. A dozen gold cloaks had come with him to the Septet of Baelor, but the new High Septon, a flinty-eyed man, had refused them entrance. Family might be allowed, but not the City Watch. He was tempted to say that the watch was in the Lannister family, as Sir Jaxlin Bywater reported to Uncle Kevin, the Master of Laws. But he held his tongue. Instead, Jaime ventured alone through the double doors past sparrows with clubs and begging brothers. The man in the cell continued to pray. Jaime banged against the bars louder, eliciting glares of reproach from other worshippers. The faith did not like him much. Jaime didn't care. Far better men than these had disliked him for good cause. Sarah Barristan, the Blackfish, and Sir Arthur Dane. Sir Arthur had died in Dorne, but he would no doubt have been disappointed in the squire he knighted at the Kingswood. Lancel, he yelled. The man in question did not move. Lancel's prayers for his family's safe return had been swiftly answered, but the fervent dedication to the faith continued. All traces of the cocky squire hungry for glory vanished during the war. Lancel, I won't leave until we speak. I am praying. Lancel remained kneeling in his humble clothes. Yaxio shook his head. A Lannister wearing a stained hair shirt, the gods had an awful sense of humor and sartorial sense. Pray later, cuz your knees will thank you. Come now before I drag you out. Lancel glared, but followed. They made their way up from the catacombs that housed the tombs, cells, and vaults of the faith. The great sept was packed. 7 towers, 7 sides, 7 statues, 7 paths, and 7 altars with 7 candles each, and yet no place to sit given the legions of sparrows, septons, and begging brothers. Jaime commandeered a confessional to the outrage of a prune-faced septa. What is it, Sir Jaime? Why do you take me from my sworn mission? On closer examination, Jaime thought his cousin had lost even more weight. It was disguised by the shapeless sack he wore and the scraggly beard that hid the hollow cheeks. Praying and fasting until you die is not a mission. When did you last eat, Lancel? Baelor the Blessed fasted to cleanse himself of sin, and he starved to death. That did no one any good. You have a family, Lancel. Come take a meal with us in the Red Keep. I had a falling out with my father, and as for Lord Tywin, his plot at the Twins was contemptible. A sin against the father and the mother above. No worse than House Lannister's actions in King's Landing 17 years ago. Lord Tywin ordered the sack of the city that killed Eoya, Martell, and the 2 Targaryen children. Snow said the deaths of the royal children were far greater stains on Jaime's white cloak than the death of Aerys. Your family will be there. Joffrey wishes. The Septons have heard many things about Joffrey. He is faithless and not fit to be king. Jaime knew that his oldest son was a piece of shit, but it surprised him that they spoke so openly about the subject at the Great Septon. If his father knew, heads would roll and be placed on spikes outside the Red Keep. Who is spreading these stores? It is not just Joffrey. Tommen will be there, and your brothers Willem and Martin, Pyrick, Aunt Jenna, Cleos and Tyrion, Sir Davin, and me, your favorite cousin, Tyrion and Cersei. Lancel shrank into himself. Like a little boy caught making trouble, he bowed his head and could not look Jaime in the eyes. I cannot see, Cersei, she asked me to. Balisardwin took hold of Lancel's shoulders with both hands. His cousin was so thin and haggard, the bones under the hair shirt would snap with a squeeze, and there were strange bumps. What? What did Cersei ask you to do? You must understand. I thought I loved her. I would have done anything for her. What did you do, Lancel? I gave King Robert poisoned wine. Flasks that Cersei gave me. That was why he was gored to death by the boar. And then she invited me into her rooms to reward me. You fucked her. Jaime kept his voice flat to hide his emotions. He suspected that the queen had invited others to bed when he had been captured for many moons by the Starks. That oaf of a kettle black who died at the royal sept. Jaime heard whispers that he was the queen's lover. There were 2 other kettle black brothers. Did she fuck them all? His fingers tightened with anger. It would take little for them to break Lancel's neck. His cousin nodded with soft sob. Jaime stilled his fingers. He needed to know more. Who else did you tell, Lancel? I confessed to the High Septon. I sought forgiveness from him. You are a fool, Lancel, an honest fool. Jaime relaxed and dropped his hands. He wondered if Lancel had made this confession in this exact spot. The High Septon knew now that Cersei had murdered the former king. The faith was opposed to Joffrey's rule, and the Sparrows had no love for Lord Tywin and House Lannister after the ravaging of the Riverlands. This had a very good chance of going tits up. I am sorry, Jaime. I am a weak man, as all human flesh is weak. Pray with me, cousin. Pray with me for forgiveness from the Seven. Jaime was about to tell him where to take his prayers when Lancel, frail body already shaking, tottered and fell. But it wasn't merely thirst and hunger. Jaime examined the skin about the neck. He had felt bumps under the homespun wool on the neck. Arms and chest, there were black bumps, swollen and warm. Jaime placed his hand on the pale brow. Lancel was burning up. He shoved the confessional open with a crash. Sarah, you cannot, an ugly septa cried out at the broken door. The top hinge smashed to bits. Master, get me a master now? Who are you to give orders to the faith? A sparrow asked. I am Jaime Lannister. My cousin, Lancel, is very sick. Which means all of you may be sick too, he snarled. In the crowded sept, panic began to spread through all 7 aisles. As she looked down the balcony on Meereen, Daenerys wondered where everything had gone wrong. Half a dozen stepped pyramids lay below, in riotous colors from green to yellow to pink. 15 more stood in other directions, built to showcase the wealth and prestige of the noble houses that resided in each. She had taken as her home the Great Pyramid, located at the central plaza. The structure was immense, 33 levels and 800 feet high. It dwarfed every other pyramid and towered over Meereen, but her apartments were not the highest point in the city. That was the great bronze harpy at the apex. The stonecutters had managed to chop off the scorpion tail, sever the bat wings, and bash in the fanged face. But remnants of the stone statue, the torso, and the arrogant eyes remained. Even now, she, a dragon of Valyria, was lower than the harpy of Gess. Daenerys Targaryen did not like that. She understood why her advisors recommended settling at the Great Pyramid. The immensely thick walls muffled the noise and kept out the heat. On the walls and along many internal passageways, rows of bronze harpy heads with open mouths were positioned to squirt boiling oil and sand on attackers below. Every ruler of Meereen had handed down judgments from the Great Pyramid, forcing supplicants to walk hundreds of steps to plead their case. Of course, the nobles of Meereen did not walk. Even without slaves, the masters relied on paid palanquins, litters, and sedan chairs, their legs too atrophied to take the stairs. I do not belong here, Daenerys thought. The Great Pyramid was a man-made mountain where worshippers came to seek out the gods. I am no god. I am a dragon. She wanted to break the wheel and usher in a better world for the people. But how could she do so if she lived so far away? The priestesses declared that to achieve peace, Daenerys had to accept the traditions of Meereen, to wear the tokar, that strange garment beloved of the old blood of Slavers Bay, to watch men die in the fighting pits, to marry a Giscari noble that could trace their lineage for 500 years. The Green Grace declared that the Queen of Meereen must be a lady of Old Gis. Old Gis enslaved all they met under the banner of the Harpy. Mesha, the dusky-skinned girl, with warm gold eyes, spoke with reverence. She turned with a smile. What is it, Missandei? I hope it is not Hisdair Zalorik pleading his case again. The noble families had put forth Hisdair as a possible husband. He was handsome but effete, a man with little energy and less passion. No, Maisha. A messenger has come from the Graces seeking an audience. Your knights are arguing whether it is some trick to harm you. Daenerys grimaced. After the fall of Meereen, she had allowed both Ser Jorah Mormont and Ser Barristan, formerly Orston Whitebeard, to remain in her service. They had both betrayed her, but they had also succeeded in freeing the slaves. She desperately needed capable followers. Her blood riders and Grey Worm were exceedingly loyal, but there were tasks beyond the Dothraki and Unsullied. Very well, lead the way. Daenerys found her advisors in her audience chamber. A long, high hall of rich purple marble. Unsullied spearmen stood with their back against the many pillars, and it was too early in the day to light the tall candles. She sat down on an unadorned ebony bench that replaced the gilded throne in the shape of a harpy that had been small enough to completely destroy. Do we know what this meeting is for? Have the priestesses come to tell me again of more suffering in the city, or to lay another dead child at my feet? Skahaz Makandak scowled. He was an ugly, beetle-browed man with small eyes and a long, hooked nose. The House of Kandak had sworn loyalty to Daenerys, and showed it by shaving their heads, eschewing the ancient customs of the Giscari. I do not believe those bones to have been a child at all. It could have been a sheep or a goat. It is possible, Your Grace. The Meereenese are sly and stubborn. I would not be surprised if your enemies are engaged in trickery. Jury's words received a snort from Daario and Barristan. You should free your dragons, the Shafebate said bluntly. The fear of being burnt will bring the other families in line. Daenerys wanted nothing more than to free Raquel and Viserion. Dragon, her mightiest son, simply refused to be chained even by his mother. But how could she claim to be merciful if her children were preying on the sons and daughters of goat herders? Enough, Serge. What is happening in the city? Are the people still hungry? Of course, Daario said. There is no trade. Slavers Bay produces only slaves. Dead slaves. Fighting slaves. Eunuchs. Scribe slaves. Slaves for the fields. Selling human flesh yields more gold than any other trade good. The masters never needed anything else for their riches. There is some copper in the mines, and wine, Jorah argued. The copper needs slaves to go into the tunnels. What freeman wants to die in a mine, and the wine is shit? It is as sour as your face. Daario replied. The ebony doors opened. The three green graces walked through first, followed by priestesses in blue and white. They bore forth the body of a young boy, perhaps of 5 or 6 name days. Daenerys saw no burn marks on the tunic or any bites on the amber skin. She felt a sigh of relief that this was not Drogon's work. Your magnificence. A woman in blue spoke. A child came to our temple 5 days hence. He had a cough and complained of both heat and cold. We bathed him in cool water and gave him food and drink. He developed black spots on his groin and blood in his excrement. He grew weaker and, despite sleeping for many hours, was unable to rise. This morning, he passed. Her advisors shrank back, and the Unsullied guards raised their shields, as if warding off evil spirits. What caused his death? Daenerys asked, dreading the answer. The Green Grace stepped forth. The plague has come to Meereen.